A chilling echo from the past shatters the peace of a grand ballroom as Steen searches frantically for his wife Ophelia, who watches with cold detachment. Steen introduces his new chess student, Lady Ariel Green, and casually demands she be allowed to stay in the estate's annex. Ariel smiles sweetly, offering mock politeness while thanking the master of the house for his extreme generosity. Ariel puts on a fragile show of gratitude, completely ignoring the tension radiating from the woman of the house. Ophelia forces a tight, polite greeting, though her eyes convey a mounting storm of rage. Clutching her green fan, Ophelia realizes with a bitter internal sigh that the betrayal of her past life is repeating itself. With a sharp snap of her fan, Ophelia prepares to face the insults of her unfaithful husband once more. Sensing her cold reception, the uninvited guest shrinks back in mock hesitation while Steen grows increasingly defensive. Steen aggressively demands to know why his wife remains silent, accusing her of deliberately making their guest feel unwelcome. Steen delivers a condescending warning, telling Ophelia she should not disturb her husband while he is working. Ophelia keeps her eyes closed, absorbing the smug disrespect of her husband's rhetorical question with silent resolve. She calmly turns her back, ordering the staff to prepare the annex for their new guest without showing a shred of weakness. Steen and Ariel share a smug, victorious look, thinking they have successfully pressured Ophelia into submission. Steen whispers a cruel, mocking insult at Ophelia's back, labeling her a useless freeloader who deserves no respect. Ophelia delivers a devastating blow over her shoulder, announcing she will not provide a single penny of funding, leaving Steen speechless. Whipping around in sheer disbelief, Steen roars after his wife, demanding she repeat her shocking statement. Steen screams in fury while Ariel cowers beside him, unable to comprehend this sudden defiance. Ophelia ignores his frantic raging commands to return, walking away with absolute grace and poise. Disgusted by their pathetic screams, Ophelia dismisses the noisy couple in the background as nothing more than an irritation.
The heavy wooden doors loom ahead as Ophelia steps out of the toxic parlor, leaving her husband's tantrums behind.
Massive doors slam shut with a resounding bang, sealing the annoying lovers inside their own drama. Stepping into the cool night air, Ophelia clutches her fan and relishes the incredibly refreshing feeling of her first victory. A bright, genuine smile graces her face as she tastes the sweet thrill of taking control of her destiny. Looking up at the starry night sky, she breathes in the freedom of her second chance at life. The elegant fabric of her red gown rustles as she stands tall, finally free from the chains of her previous misery. Tears of overwhelming relief well in Ophelia's eyes as she smiles under the stars, realizing she is truly alive. Known to the world as Ophelia Heavenwalker, the wealthy count's daughter, she secretly harbors a truth no one else knows. In her previous life, she was poisoned, coughing up blood, and dying a miserable, lonely death while her husband laughed. But a mysterious miracle occurred, sending her back in time to the very day her husband brought his mistress hall. Her eyes snapped open in the past, burning with a new, vengeful flame of determination. Waking up in her bed, she realized she had been granted a second chance to rewrite her tragic fate. Sitting up in bed, the memories of her husband's cruel betrayal flooded back with terrifying clarity. She remembered the exact moment her husband brought Ariel into their home, sparking her downward spiral. Holding her fan, she swears a solemn vow that she will never fall victim to their wicked schemes again. The words of their past deception echo in her mind, fueling her desire for absolute retribution. Remembering how they flaunted their affection, Ophelia vows to return every single ounce of grief they ever caused her. She promises to execute her revenge with merciless cruelty, paying them back tenfold for their sins. Still standing on the dark balcony, her heart burns with cold, calculated fury as she plots her next move. Shivering slightly from the cold breeze, she decides it is time to head back inside to prepare her next move. Meanwhile, inside the parlor, a furious Steen smashes a glass, raging over the public humiliation Ophelia just dealt him. Ariel gently caresses Steen's face, playing the victim and telling him she is just happy to be near him. Steen gazes at her with adoration, praising her gentle heart while completely falling for her manipulation. Ariel smiles sweet poison, holding him close and relishing her apparent victory over the lady of the house. They hold hands in a display of sickening romance, oblivious to the storm of vengeance heading their way. The curtain rises on a battle of wits and revenge, setting the stage for a dramatic upheaval. Ophelia, dressed in elegant blue, prepares her strategy with a confident smirk, holding her quill like a weapon. Born as the cherished only daughter of the incredibly wealthy Count Heavenwalker, her life was initially a fairy tale. Wrapped in luxury from her first breath, everyone deemed the young heiress to be exceptionally blessed. She grew up showered with adoration and luxury, always the dazzling center of attention at every high society gathering. Sitting on her bed with a book, the young heiress welcomes a visitor, completely unaware of the dark fate awaiting her in the future. An unexpected announcement shatters the peaceful mansion as a maid excitedly delivers news of the Count's sudden return. Young Ophelia's eyes light up with pure joy at the mention of her beloved father. Guided by the maid, the ecstatic young heiress eagerly rushes down the hallway to find him. She bursts through the heavy study doors, calling out to her father in sheer excitement. Her smile instantly fades as she finds nothing but an empty sunlit desk chair. The maid searches the vacant room in utter confusion, wondering where the Count could have gone. On the wooden desk, a pristine white envelope lying next to a plush rabbit catches their attention. The heart-wrenching letter reveals her father had to leave abruptly on urgent business, leaving behind a farewell gift. Ophelia silently absorbs the painful news while her maid gently inspects the cute stuffed animal. The young heiress realizes her father's demanding trading empire will keep him forever out of reach. Deepening solitude becomes her only companion within the massive, cold hallways of the empty estate. Although the dedicated staff pampers her constantly, they can never replace a parent's warmth. No amount of luxury can soothe the heavy void of isolation weighing down on her soul. Shrouded in this growing anxiety, 19 years slip by in a silent flash of loneliness. Forced to attend a high society party, the sheltered heiress immediately feels out of place among the gossiping aristocrats. Surrounded by pointing fingers and whispers, Ophelia desperately wishes to fade into the background. Unable to bear the overwhelming social anxiety, she turns to flee the suffocating ballroom. In her frantic rush, she collides headfirst with a stranger and begins to stammer an apology. Looking up, she meets the gaze of an incredibly handsome blonde nobleman. Time stands completely still as the two strangers share a prolonged, intense look. The charming gentleman politely inquires if she is all right, sending her heart into a frenzy. Captivated by his stunning appearance and flawless manners, Ophelia is instantly mesmerized. Their brief encounter is cut short when a guest calls him away by his name, Steen. With a polite bow, Steen excuses himself and turns to leave her side. He quickly disappears into the crowd, leaving Ophelia standing alone with her racing thoughts. A sudden rush of passionate infatuation completely overwhelms the young woman's senses. Clutching her chest, she realizes she has just fallen hopelessly in love. Blinded by naive hope, she foolishly believes Steen is the one destined to heal her lonely heart. Ophelia eagerly begs her father to let her marry the charming young nobleman immediately. Though the Count reluctantly consents to the union, he insists on a strict financial prenuptial agreement. Steen is visibly distressed by the tight conditions, but her father remains absolutely adamant. Before departing, her father delivers a stern warning to never blindly trust any man with her future. With those chilling final words of advice, her father turns his back and walks away. Tragically, it is the last warning her father ever gives before perishing at sea. Soon after his death, a dark and deeply unsettling shift plagues Ophelia's marriage. Left in isolation once more, she weeps bitterly as her husband spends all his time outside the home. Her worst nightmares are realized when she catches Steen shopping happily with another woman. Driven to insecurity, Ophelia critically judges her own body in her bedroom mirror.
She desperately consults society magazines, reading advice that a husband's affection is determined by his wife's submission.
Cast under a pathetic spell of desperation, she tries cooing suggestively to win back Steen's cold heart. She even attempts bizarre, seductive performances, leaving Steen thoroughly bewildered and disgusted by her behavior. The humiliation reaches its peak when Steen shamelessly brings his beautiful mistress Ariel Green into their estate. Terrified of losing him completely, Ophelia forces a pathetic smile and welcomes her husband's lover. Despite her maid's furious warnings about Steen's blatant disrespect, Ophelia continues to make excuses for him. Clinging to the desperate delusion of reclaiming his love, she refuses to acknowledge the obvious betrayal. Her fragile mind begins to fracture under the strain, obsessively believing he will look at her again. The intense mental and physical anguish finally break her body, causing Ophelia to collapse to the floor.
Hearing the loud crash, Steen and Ariel rush into the hallway with looks of utter shock.
Panic erupts as the terrified maid frantically screams for someone to call a doctor immediately. Cradled in her maid's arms, Ophelia lies completely unresponsive, leaving her tragic fate hanging in the balance. A husband's shocking cruelty starts our tale as the silver-haired Steen violently orders a sick woman back to her room, causing his blonde companion to gasp in surprise. Coughing up blood, the pale red-haired wife weakly requests her loyal maid Anna to help her walk away. Confined to her deathbed, the exhausted woman desperately gasps for air as her final moments draw near. Dragging her failing body, she musters her remaining strength to say one last goodbye to her husband. But as she peeks through his door, a horrifying sight shatters whatever warmth was left in her heart. Inside the dimly lit room, her silver-haired husband lies intertwined in an intimate embrace with another woman. Tears stream down her face as the ultimate betrayal drains the last of her fading life force. A cruel tragedy ends her first life, but a dark vow of vengeance is born in her soul. A divine entity looks down in pity, lamenting how a bright soul had to perish at the young age of 25. Suddenly, her eyes snap open with a fiery glow as she is miraculously given a second chance at life. Gasping for breath, she kneels in gratitude to her savior and resolves to live this new life to the absolute fullest. She recalls the painful memory of her husband and his blonde lover flaunting their affair 3 years ago. Despite her sudden reincarnation, the phantom pain of their past emotional torment still lingers in her fingertips. The red-haired countess sits tall, absolutely disgusted by how pathetically she allowed herself to be treated. As she twists her wedding ring in quiet contemplation, a sudden knock on the door interrupts her thoughts. A polite maid enters the room to announce that dinner is finally ready. Still exhausted by her lingering grief, the countess sighs, wondering how she could possibly find an appetite. Suddenly, a sharp realization strikes her as her eyes narrow with a cold, protective rage. In a bitter memory, her silver-haired husband brutally body-shames her at the dining table, mocking her appearance. The arrogant man continues his toxic insults, demandingly telling her to keep fit because she's a woman. Reeling from his cruelty, she had fled the table in tears, leaving her husband to invite his blonde lover to sit in her place. Back in the present, a dark, triumphant smirk spreads across her face as she remembers how she used to starve herself for him. When the maid turns to leave, the fierce countess suddenly commands her to wait. Standing tall with unwavering resolve, she boldly announces that she will dine in the main hall tonight. She resolves to eat well and build her strength, leaving her maid pleasantly surprised by her sudden spark of defiance. With slow, deliberate steps, she begins her march toward the lion's den. She remembers her past desperate attempts to starve herself as the maid prepares to open the dining room doors. Realizing all of her past sacrifices were in vain, she approaches the entrance with newfound pride. But upon reaching the threshold, the maid suddenly stops and stammers in visible hesitation. From inside the room, the mocking laughter of her husband and his lover echoes clearly through the hallway. Inside, the silver-haired man and his blonde companion are giggling intimately over a lavish dessert. The loyal maid trembles in uneasy suspense, dreading the imminent confrontation. Commanding her meal, the countess firmly commands the hesitant maid to open the doors immediately. Stealing her courage, the maid throws the massive doors wide open. The cheating couple freezes in absolute shock as the maid loudly announces the countess's grand arrival. The entire household staff gasps in terror, sensing the sudden shift in power. The red-haired countess strides down the long red carpet, completely ignoring the heavy silence. Steen looks up in utter disbelief as the whispering servants watch the mistress approach the table. Her heels click sharply against the floor, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. She reaches the head of the table and questions why the servants are standing so stiffly. Gracefully sitting down, she demands that her food be served to her immediately. The servants whisper in a panicked frenzy, completely unsure of where to place her plate. Steen glares at her in pure rage, demandingly questioning why she is sitting in that specific chair. Calmly lifting her glass, she coolly points out that she merely took an empty seat. The silver-haired man slams his hands down, furiously pointing out that she has taken the master's seat. He aggressively demands if his words mean absolutely nothing to her anymore. Smiling serenely, she proudly declares that she is the true hostess of this household. He points out that the mistress should never sit below a mere guest, leaving her husband completely speechless. Terrified by the countess's icy composure, the blonde lover quickly stands up to yield the seat. The red-haired mistress mockingly questions if they are truly leaving their food behind, signaling her ultimate victory. Ophelia will no longer tolerate being treated like an unwanted guest in her own home as her blonde mistress scoffs, claiming she is already thin enough. Stunned by the mistress's sheer audacity, Ophelia coldly questions if she is even capable of standing on her own 2 feet. Steen rises in a defensive huff, coddling his mistress and offering to escort her away from the sudden tension. Playing the victim, the mistress expresses her fake gratitude to the husband for his protection. She glances back with a smug, mocking smirk, fully believing she has won this round. The heavy parlor door slams shut with a resounding bang, finally locking the drama out. Silence settles heavily over the dining hall as Ophelia is left completely alone at the massive table. Her loyal maid stands by, staring in complete disbelief and concern for her mistress. The maid can barely contain her anger, venting her frustration over Steen's continuous disrespect. Keeping her composure, Ophelia listens calmly as her maid points out the mistress's bizarre behavior. Raising her hand gently, Ophelia reassures her loyal maid that she is completely unbothered by their pathetic antics. A cold, calculated smirk plays on her lips as she promises a massive storm is about to tear through the estate. Seizing control of her schedule, Ophelia orders a carriage to be prepared first thing in the morning. Her hand remains open as she brings up the critical matter of the mistress's lifestyle expenses. Clenching her fist, she decisively commands that Ariel's expenses be deducted directly from Steen's personal budget. As the next morning arrives, her maid happily announces that the carriage is ready for a departure. Carriage departs, leaving the gloomy estate behind as she heads toward a brand new destination. Arriving at her destination, Ophelia steps out with absolute determination, tuning out the idle chatter of passing nobles. Her elegant patterned dress rustles softly as she strides purposefully toward the grand doors. Meanwhile, the pathetic lovers continue their nauseating flirting, completely unaware of the trap she is setting. Her loyal maid reveals the Earl's restrictive instructions designed to keep her out of the way. A cold, mocking expression hardens Ophelia's face as she finds their petty manipulations amusingly pathetic. Snapping her fingers with absolute authority, she calls out for her loyal steward, Jackson. Jackson, the faithful steward of the clan, steps forward to receive his mistress's highly confidential command. She points a commanding finger, ordering Jackson to completely banish the toxic couple from her estate. A look of utter shock flashes behind Jackson's glasses as he realizes she intends to evict the Earl himself. Despite his shock, the loyal steward bows deeply in absolute obedience to her bold declaration. Stepping out of the estate, Ophelia bids a pleasant farewell to her maid as she boards her carriage. Finding her foot firmly onto the step, she instructs her driver to head toward a very specific destination. Seated inside the lavish carriage, she stares ahead with a look of quiet, burning determination. The stage is set for a dramatic turning point as her silent plans finally begin to unfold. Resting her cheek in her hand, she listens to the steady rhythm of the carriage wheels with deep satisfaction. Memories of her youth flood back, recalling the warmth of her mother's favorite clothing boutique. She fondly remembers the bright, enthusiastic tailor who always welcomed her family with a genuine smile. The gentle tailor had always offered comfort to her lonely heart through her beautiful, honest designs. Painful memories of mourning in the pouring rain remind her of the tragic losses that left her isolated. Touching her elegant shirt, she takes comfort knowing it was crafted by that same beloved tailor, Kate. The carriage doors swing open and Ophelia steps out into the bright morning, ready for an emotional reunion. She gazes up at the magnificent gated entrance of the boutique, taking a deep breath before entering. Walking inside, her eyes sweep across the lavish interior, searching for a familiar, friendly face. A sudden frantic voice calls out from across the room, demanding she halt her steps. Curly-haired woman in a red floral dress rushes forward, completely shocked to see Ophelia. It is Kate, the beloved tailor, who beams with ecstatic joy and asks if she has been keeping warm. Kate's elegant red skirt swirls as she dashes over, her eyes sparkling with genuine happiness.
Ophelia smiles warmly, confirming she spent the winter comfortably and has come to place a new order.
Overjoyed, Kate frantically gestures toward a plush sofa, urging her esteemed guest to sit and relax. Kate eagerly presents a design book filled with the boutique's latest lavish fashion creations. However, Ophelia explains that she is no longer interested in empty luxury, but desires comfortable, honest clothing. Kate freezes in complete bewilderment, stunned by the noble heiress's unexpected and humble request. Shaking off her surprise, Kate frantically dashes out of the room to fetch the perfect fabric, leaving Ophelia smiling in suspense. She always knew the truth, but her past was about to catch up with her. At the moment, the capital is experiencing a massive craze for Madame Chouette's skirts. The current design features a heavy round skirt with jewelry and colorful embroidery, requiring a travel companion. After dominating fashion for 2 years, people are finally looking for more comfortable, glitz-free designs. The upcoming trend brings out the beauty of fabrics, focusing heavily on comfort. Ophelia resolves to be the first to wear the new style, refusing to repeat her past life's mistakes. The nervous designer Kate trembles as she presents her unfinished work to the Countess. Ophelia examines the portfolio while Kate covers her face, begging for her honest opinion. A tense silence fills the room as Ophelia calls out to Kate. Kate tearfully asks what is wrong and if the Countess dislikes her work. Ophelia steps forward, offering Kate as much money as possible because her skills are worth it. Ophelia suddenly grabs Kate's hands, leaving her completely shocked by the sudden gesture. With sparkling eyes, Ophelia declares her absolute determination to be the first person to wear the design. Kate accepts the offer, telling her lady to leave everything to her. Kate promises to create a dress that fits the Countess perfectly. She beams with a massive, joyful grin as her passion is fully reignited. Ophelia happily notes Kate's renewed determination before deciding to purchase more items. Ophelia goes on a shopping spree, ordering every mannequin dress while Kate watches in bewilderment.
She continues pointing out luxury accessories, leaving her companion thoroughly overwhelmed.
Kate happily resolves to make the perfect dress for her radiant lady. The scene shifts to the grand estate under a bright, sunny sky. The carriage comes to a halt as they arrive back at the mansion. Ophelia thanks her driver, instructing him to bring her new clothes to the changing room. He turns around in confusion, wondering why someone has suddenly returned. Ophelia gasps in shock upon finding her ex-husband Steen laughing inside her mansion. Steen arrogantly claims he is punishing the servant, while a blonde woman weeps behind him. He angrily demands to know how she dared to chase his guests from the mansion. The dark-haired duke and reddish-haired countess stand together in a dangerous game of high society power. Ophelia glares with intense, icy hostility at her shameless ex-husband. Steen sneers arrogantly, demanding to know who ordered his guests to be taken to the outhouse. Ophelia calmly explains there is a misunderstanding, reminding him that he agreed the guests would stay in the outbuilding. Steen shouts in rage, claiming he only wanted to treat his guest well instead of forcing her into outdated facilities. Ophelia stands speechless as she wonders why Lady Green is crying again. Lady Green weeps dramatically, asking how Ophelia can be so cold when she only wanted to be kind. Ophelia sarcastically suggests taking Lady Green to the Imperial Palace if she finds the remodeled facility unacceptable. Steen yells in defensive fury, accusing Ophelia of looking down on Lady Green due to her lower noble status. He mockingly asks if Ophelia is angry because she is old-fashioned, telling her she knows what to do if she falls behind. Ophelia stands tall and confident, coldly reminding him that she was the one who gave him everything he has. Steen freezes in utter shock and disbelief at her devastating reminder. Ophelia declares she will still move Lady Green to the outhouse, suggesting Steen can move out with her if he is so worried. Steen screams in frantic desperation, asking if she is planning to move into his room. Ophelia mockingly questions him, asking if her suggestion is bad and if his guest would not feel more comfortable in the outhouse. Steen stammers in helpless rage before finally backing down and agreeing to her terms. Lady Green desperately squeezes his arm, maintaining her victim act. She tearfully claims she refused the room but offers to move out now since he was too stubborn. Steen turns to his weeping companion, gently asking if she is all right. Lady Green flashes a sweet, hidden smile to keep her manipulation intact. Ophelia orders her maid to send more staff to the outhouse, gracefully telling Lady Green not to be shy if she needs anything. Ophelia kindly tells the kneeling butler Jackson to stand up, earning his tearful gratitude. Walking away, Ophelia ponders Lady Green's mysterious tears, realizing she only met her because of her simple-minded ex-husband. She refuses to let distraction delay her next high-stakes moves as she takes a firm step forward. Her thoughts drift to a solemn wish that her family's precious legacy remains untouched after she is gone. Standing inside the grand empty library, she searches for clues about her husband's secret movements. The determined heiress quickly realizes she must locate the ledger tracking all incoming and outgoing funds. She successfully uncovers the precise financial record she needs to expose the truth. Her anger flares upon discovering her husband's shameless plot to squander every last bit of her family's wealth. Desperately needing a massive payout to save her lineage, she spins around to brainstorm high-stakes investment opportunities. A brilliant spark of inspiration hits her as she realizes aggressive land speculation is the key to absolute wealth. With absolute confidence, she unveils a massive map, ready to execute her brilliant financial plan. She immediately targets a specific, undeveloped slum located right outside the capital for her next move. Her fingers trace the shelves until she pulls the exact catalog documenting the targeted land zones. She recalls future knowledge that this very location will soon transform into a highly lucrative art paradise. Studying the blueprints, she admires how the upcoming grand construction projects will employ the needy. She remembers how the royal prince will ultimately steal all the public credit from the brilliant duke who initiated the project. Slamming her hand against the desk, she relates to the duke's tragic fate of being cast aside and ignored. With the perfect window of opportunity wide open, she prepares to strike before anyone else realizes the land's true value. As she calculates the massive profit potential of reselling the property to royalty, a sudden knock interrupts her thoughts. Her loyal maid Anna enters the room, warmly offering her mistress a comforting sweet treat to ease her mind. During their quiet chat, the maid reveals that the mistress has officially moved into the estate's outbuilding. Eating her snack, she casually shrugs off her husband's inevitable temper tantrum as his anger mounts. Meanwhile, a furious fist slams onto a desk inside the husband's private quarters. The blonde husband Steen fumes in absolute outrage over his wife's sudden defiant change in attitude. Flopping onto his bed, Steen sighs over how dull his life feels without his beloved mistress nearby. Closing his eyes, he longingly whispers his lover's name into the quiet room. Fondly pictures his golden-haired mistress, confident that she possesses the exact charm to keep him captivated. Her elegant beauty flashes in his mind, surrounded by blooming pink flowers. He happily smiles, completely enchanted by her clever, playful nature. In his daydream, the beautiful mistress teases him for missing her so quickly after their brief separation. He eagerly checks on her comfort in the outbuilding, while she sweetly reassures him not to worry. When he desperately offers to bring her back to the main house, she dramatically declines. Playing the ultimate martyr, she claims she would rather endure the wife's wrath alone to protect him. Shedding tears, she manipulatively declares that simply being his mistress is enough as long as they are together. Her tearful act works flawlessly, completely melting his heart as he promises to grant her every desire. Two lovers hold hands in absolute delight, celebrating their successful emotional manipulation. With her grip on him tighter than ever, she excitedly suggests planning a romantic outing for the very next day. The scene shifts to a struggling real estate agency where the desperate staff laments their failing business. The worried agents stress over their dire financial state, fearing they can barely afford to feed themselves. Suddenly, one of the employees leaps to his feet in absolute shock at an unexpected sight outside. Peering through the window, they scramble to their positions upon recognizing a wealthy count's carriage pulling up. A dramatic new chapter begins as the wealthy client prepares to step inside the humble office. Quietly but purposefully, the mysterious noblewoman's heels click against the floor as she enters. The desperate agents rush forward with ecstatic smiles, eager to pitch their available properties. She calmly reveals she is only interested in purchasing a specific plot of land in the Commoner's district. The shocked agent quickly consults his records to verify her highly unusual choice of location. Her demand to purchase additional neighboring slots leaves the agent completely baffled, reminding him of another recent inquiry. He stares at her in sheer bewilderment, wondering if there is a hidden fortune buried in that slum. Her eyes widen in sudden alarm as she demands to know who else has been snooping around her target. The nervous agent quickly reassures her that the mysterious competitor merely inquired and left without buying. A victorious, knowing smirk plays on her lips as she realizes her plans are still perfectly on track. The agents gasp in absolute disbelief as she decisively demands to buy the entire massive territory on the spot. Stepping into the agency, Ophelia's ruthless financial gambit begins as she casually inquires if the target slum's price is merely half of the capital's average rate. Without a moment's hesitation, she declares she will pay the full deposit immediately to secure the entire territory before anyone else can react. Once she departs, the bewildered real estate agents whisper in absolute shock over the sudden purchase of those seemingly worthless lots. Suddenly, the office doors fly open as a wealthy competitor strides inside, instantly terrifying the gossiping staff. The formidable nobleman demands to know the exact identity of the mysterious buyer who just purchased his target land. The trembling agent quickly explains that they are strictly forbidden from revealing a noble client's private transaction records. Unimpressed by their excuses, the cold-blooded nobleman reveals his identity as Osteon Bryant.
Absolute panic erupts in the humble office as the staff realizes they are standing right before the powerful Count himself.
Dropping to their knees in terror, they desperately offer to negotiate a direct meeting between the Count and the mysterious female buyer. Meanwhile, the heavy carriage wheels roll to a stop as the driver announces their arrival at a highly confidential location. Ophelia steps inside the elegant building, where her sharp-eyed legal advisor warmly welcomes her for their scheduled meeting. Adjusting his glasses, the advisor directs his mistress to the inner room where the sensitive legal documents are fully prepared. Looking over the flawless paperwork, a triumphant smile plays on Ophelia's lips as her grand strategy begins to align. Her composure slips as she passionately vents about her husband's increasingly outrageous and toxic behavior both at home and in public. Raising his feather quill, the advisor gently urges her to calm down and maintain her composure for the sake of their legal case. He warns her that showing excessive anger will act as a major negative factor when they present their case before the imperial court. He carefully notes down the details, reminding her how incredibly rare and legally risky it is for a noble woman to file for divorce first. Listening quietly on the red velvet couch, Ophelia realizes that even the slightest public emotional slip could put her at a severe disadvantage. The advisor stresses that absolute patience is her greatest weapon until the imperial court delivers its final binding verdict. As she accepts his clean strategy, a heavy sense of impending battle settles over the quiet room. Riding home, Ophelia convinces herself that anger is useless and she must wait for the perfect moment to execute her divorce. Striding through her grand hallway, she tries to mentally calm herself, only to freeze upon hearing familiar, playful laughter echoing from the parlor. A sudden realization hits her as she turns toward the doorway, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief at the sight before her. Her blood runs cold as she spots her golden-haired rival parading around in her own precious blue gown. Trembling with absolute fury, Ophelia screams at the intruder to immediately strip off the custom dress her late father bought for her. Steen casually dismisses her anger, mockingly suggesting it is better than letting a dusty old dress rot uselessly in a dark closet. The manipulative mistress plays the delicate martyr, clutching her hands as she deceptively claims she was only trying to be honest. Looking down in utter disgust, Ophelia can barely contain her hatred for the two shameless parasites standing before her. Stepping forward, she coldly notes their complete lack of class and shame, prompting her husband to flinch in outrage. With a gaze colder than ice, she directly targets Steen, making it clear that he is the truly shameless one in this room. Steen stands frozen in absolute shock, completely stunned by his wife's unprecedented defiance and lethal glare. A loud slam echoes through the parlor as Ophelia retreats to her quarters, shutting them out completely. Standing outside the grand wooden doors, the husband mutters in confusion, highly annoyed by his wife's sudden explosive rebellion. Turning to his mistress, Steen gently apologizes for the scene, wrapping a comforting arm around her fragile shoulders. Back in their private quarters, the mistress raises two elegant wine glasses to toast her lord with a sly smile. Relaxing on the lavish sofa, Steen eagerly invites her to join him for a romantic evening drink to escape the tension. She sweetly leans in, whispering that every single effort she makes is entirely for his pleasure and happiness. Caressing his face, she playfully asks if his wife is still fond of drinking fine wine. Steen shifts uncomfortably, admitting he has absolutely no interest in talking about his tedious wife tonight. She rewards his loyalty with a passionate kiss, completely sealing her manipulative grip over his foolish heart. Softly giggling, she places his glass down on the table, moving to prepare their special evening beverages. With a playful farewell, she slips away to fetch the drinks, leaving the enchanted lord waiting in anticipation. Secretly hidden from sight, she slowly pours a mysterious glowing red potion into the target beverage. Back in her quiet study, Ophelia holds a sealed envelope, whispering that setting her final trap is surprisingly easy. She sits gracefully at her grand mahogany desk, carefully reviewing the strategic document in her hands. Her mind briefly wanders to her current marital status, wondering if her aggressive pursuit of divorce is the right move. Suddenly, the door swings open and Steen strides in, holding a dark bottle of red wine with an arrogant smirk. A sharp sting of suspicion hits Ophelia as she glares at her husband's unexpected and highly suspicious intrusion. He falsely claims he merely wanted to share a rare romantic drink with his long-neglected wife after all this time. Her eyes narrow onto the dark bottle, realizing a deadly high-stakes game of survival has officially begun. Her treacherous husband's pathetic attempt at a romantic gesture immediately falls flat as his toxic trap backfires spectacularly. Steen defensively questions why she dislikes the wine, reminding her that she drank it constantly when they were dating. Ophelia coldly admits she only pretended to like the wine to please him, highlighting his complete ignorance of her real preferences throughout their entire marriage. Sweating nervously, Steen claims he doesn't drink and urgently pushes her to take a taste of the poison vintage. He paces forward, complaining that she has been acting incredibly strange and distant lately compared to their usual interactions. Ophelia casually shifts the conversation, mentioning she recently heard some highly intriguing rumors regarding a certain count at the opera house. Rising from her desk with an imposing smile, Ophelia reveals she knows about the mistress occupying the wife's rightful seat. Steen completely panics, frantically shutting down the conversation and claiming he suddenly remembered an urgent matter to escape her line of questioning. A resounding slam echoes through the room as Steen retreats in absolute terror, leaving Ophelia standing alone. Slumping back into her chair, an exhausted Ophelia groans about her growing headache as the stress of the battle settles in. Glancing sideways, she questions if someone has entered her study to offer comfort. A sealed letter lies quietly on the desk, waiting to seal her husband's fate. Back in their quarters, Steen anxiously questions the situation while his golden-haired mistress teasingly coos at him. Ariel urges Steen to remain patient while he mutters in deep frustration. Seeking comfort, Steen buries his face into his mistress's shoulder on the lavish bed. Steen complains to Ariel about how difficult Ophelia has become, comparing her unfavorably to his mistress. Ariel wears a smug smile as she listens to Steen compare her rival to a devil. Leaning in close, the manipulative mistress eagerly begs him to share more details of his wife's misery. Steen's grip tightens on the bedsheets as their intimate, treasonous conversation continues. With an eager grin, the foolish husband asks her for more specific details of her plans. Playful giggles and laughter fill the room as the two lovers lose themselves in their private bubble. Steen curiously asks his mistress why she insisted on hearing the story first. Outside their door, the distinct floral pattern of Ophelia's gown stands perfectly still as the giggles echo. Walking away, a deeply hurt Ophelia realizes she was a fool for ever trying to connect with her husband. Sadness instantly hardens into icy, unforgiving wrath as Ophelia prepares to strike back. The loyal butler bows respectfully, asking if she has called for him. He waits quietly, asking if his mistress has another urgent command to execute. With a cold smirk, Ophelia plans a highly public, flashy scandal that will destroy her husband's reputation. She delivers her final directive, ordering the entire household staff to assemble early the next morning. A victorious smile spreads across her face as her ultimate revenge plot is officially set in motion. The next morning at 7, the quiet estate prepares for an absolute social earthquake. Standing before the bedroom door in a crimson gown, Ophelia commands her assembled staff to fling the doors wide open. The heavy doors slam open with a deafening crash, exposing the bedroom's scandalous secrets to the entire staff. The maids violently rip back the heavy red curtains, letting the bright morning light flood the bed. Screaming in absolute shock, the golden-haired mistress desperately clutches the golden sheets to cover herself. Shielding his trembling mistress, Steen roars in fury, demanding that his wife get out of the room immediately. Ophelia lets out a cold sigh of disgust as the staff gasps in absolute horror behind her. Without saying a word, she ruthlessly tosses the official legal documents directly onto their bed. The papers flutter onto the bed, leaving the adulterous couple frozen in complete and utter bewilderment. Standing tall, the vengeful wife prepares to deliver her final devastating blow to her husband's pride. Absolute panic sweeps the room as the witnesses realize the gravity of the situation. Trying to salvage his pride, Steen arrogantly sneers that she will not be taking a single coin of his fortune. Ophelia coldly demands they leave everything she bought them, right down to the undergarments scattered across the floor. Ophelia introduces Richard Cox, her elite legal advisor, who steps forward to take total control of the proceedings. The advisor formally announces he is filing for divorce on behalf of Mrs. Heavenwards, offering to answer any legal questions. Naked and utterly humiliated, the panicked couple frantically tries to hide beneath the sheets. Veins popping in his arms, Steen violently crumples the legal papers in a desperate fit of rage. In a blind fury, Steen hurls the crumpled document straight at the attorney's face, roaring against the divorce. Completely unfazed by the tantrum, the composed attorney smoothly transitions to outlining their legal evidence. With a cold smile, the attorney prepares to reveal the detailed log of their illicit nocturnal activity, sealing their doom. Caught dead to rights, the treacherous husband freezes in absolute terror as his entire world completely shatters before his eyes. Smiling coldly, Ophelia silently praises her legal advisor's absolute lack of hesitation in facing down a noble. With a graceful spin, she dismisses herself, leaving her highly capable attorney to handle the dirty work. Glancing back with icy red eyes, she makes it clear she knows his deepest, darkest secrets. The cornered adulterers sit frozen in bed, utterly crushed under the weight of her parting insult. Veins popping in his neck, the panicked husband screams in a desperate attempt to regain control. His desperate, raging screams echo uselessly down the grand, empty halls of the estate. Wearing a victorious smile, Ophelia elegantly strides away from the pathetic chaos behind her. A startled maid calls out to her mistress as violent thuds echo from the parlor. A sudden call from her staff stops Ophelia, reminding her it is time to depart. Catching her breath, the resilient countess prepares to execute the next phase of her master plan. Under a beautifully clear sky, she resolves to turn this day of victory into a moment of personal triumph. Panic-stricken land clerks burst into tears of absolute relief upon seeing her arrival. A deeply suspicious Ophelia questions why they are greeting her with such dramatic excitement. The clerks hurriedly guide her toward a mysterious visitor waiting behind closed doors. Meeting his gaze, she is instantly captivated by a pair of strikingly deep blue eyes. A breathtakingly handsome nobleman with dark hair is introduced as the powerful Duke Bryant. Surrounded by blooming flowers, her mind remains entirely fixated on his hypnotic blue gaze. Ophelia curtsies gracefully as the polite Duke offers his sincere condolences for her late father. Smiling politely, she anticipates his business proposal regarding her recently acquired territories. The dark-haired Duke seeks confirmation of her massive land purchase, which she proudly admits. The Duke drops a bombshell, offering to pay 3 times her original buying price. She delivers a stunning refusal, leaving the powerful nobleman utterly speechless in disbelief. Desperate to secure the deal, the Duke immediately raises his offer to an astronomical 5 times the price. Raising her hand, she firmly rejects the deal, leaving the Duke lamenting her unwavering resolve. Determined to win her over, the scheming Duke resolves to change his strategy. A giant question mark looms over Ophelia as the atmosphere suddenly shifts. Flashing a confident smile, the Duke promises to lavish her with whatever her heart desires. Before she can process his words, he boldly grabs her hand with sudden intensity. Sweeping her away into a shower of cherry blossoms, he drags her along as she protests. Walking with fierce determination, the Duke silently vows to achieve his mysterious goal. Clinging to her hand, he refuses to let go as she struggles to keep up. Stumbling behind him, she demands answers as he begs her to accompany him to 3 specific locations. Walking down the busy city streets, she internally groans at this incredibly bizarre turn of events. They arrive at their first destination, a lavish display of sparkling gold and priceless gemstone jewelry. Ophelia stands in stunned disbelief, completely bewildered by the glittering treasure laid out before her. The Duke generously invites her to take her time and choose anything she wants. He eagerly points out exquisite diamonds and emeralds, trying to find something that matches her eyes. The noble Duke stares at her with a gentle, soft look, quietly observing her reaction. Brushing a strand of hair back, Ophelia lets out a pleasant laugh amidst a background of bright flowers. He quickly escorts her to the next location, leading her straight into a high-end boutique. Ophelia holds her head in complete dizziness, wondering if he is simply trying to cheer her up. The Duke scratches his head sheepishly, admitting he only wanted to lighten her heavy mood. She crosses her arms, unimpressed, refusing to let her guard down so easily. Her elegant peach-colored gown flows gracefully as she stands firm against his charms. The Duke pleads for just one more chance, begging her to accompany him to one final destination. Flashing a dazzling, glistening smile, he gently asks her to trust him just this once. Following him through the grand city streets, she wonders what kind of surprise awaits her next. She recalls the Duke's notorious reputation in high society, pondering if his bad rumors are actually true. Her deep thoughts are suddenly cut short as they arrive at their destination, leaving her on the edge of a major discovery. Staring with absolute resolve, Ophelia arrives at their final destination. She looks up in surprise at the dessert shop's bright sign. The charming Duke politely invites her to step inside the sweet establishment. As Duke Bryant orders refreshments, Ophelia curiously scans her new surroundings. Ophelia asks if he visits frequently, prompting the Duke to explain that his guard highly recommended the shop. Smiling warmly, the Duke hopes she enjoys the treats, eliciting a flustered response from her. Exquisite, freshly baked pastries are served on an elegant plate. Ophelia's eyes widen with hunger as she struggles to contain her drool. She takes a bite and is instantly transported to absolute culinary heaven. The Duke amusedly notes her obvious enjoyment, catching her completely off guard. Despite the delicious treats, Ophelia remains firm in her refusal to sell. The Duke inquires about her refusal, but Ophelia politely keeps her personal reasons confidential. Taking a slow sip, Ophelia directly asks why the Duke is so desperate for the land. Duke Bryant remains quiet, carefully contemplating his response to her direct question. Deducing that the second prince is the true buyer behind the cultural project, Ophelia formulates a clever plan and accepts the situation. Smiling confidently, Ophelia demands that the true buyer meet her face-to-face before she reconsiders the deal. The Duke stares in utter shock at her incredibly bold proposition. Realizing he has no other choice, the Duke reluctantly prepares to accept her terms. A mysterious, glittering confidence returns to the handsome Duke's expression. Riding in her carriage, Ophelia reasons that the cautious second prince will likely send the Duke back to negotiate again. Ophelia reflects on Duke Bryant's surprisingly gentle and kind behavior toward her. She happily holds her dessert box, grateful for discovering the wonderful bakery. The driver politely announces that they have safely returned to the estate.
After Ophelia instructs her maid to store the cake, a furious voice suddenly screams her name.
Steen stands panting alongside his mistress, waiting to confront his returning wife. Stomping his foot in anger, Steen aggressively demands to know where she has been. Steen fiercely rejects the divorce, questioning his wife's absolute sanity and demanding it. Grabbing her arm violently, Steen's aggressive outburst forces Ophelia to cry out. As Steen roars for her attention and refuses to let go, Ophelia desperately struggles to break free from his painful grip. The golden-haired mistress suddenly loses her balance, letting out a sharp cry. Sudden physical clash leaves the mistress on the floor as Ophelia turns in shock. Panic screams echo through the halls as the dramatic confrontation completely devolves. Steen rushes to cradle his fallen mistress on the floor while Ophelia stands frozen in disbelief. Crying tearfully, the manipulative mistress falsely apologizes, claiming she only wanted to intervene in their struggle. Blaming his wife, Steen furiously barks that her behavior is excessive and demands to know what his mistress did to deserve it. Glaring back, Ophelia defensively states she already apologized and had no malicious intent. Carrying his mistress away, Steen refuses to listen to any more excuses and abruptly leaves. Standing completely alone, Ophelia is left stung by Steen's harsh, insulting remarks. Secret onlookers hidden in the bushes write down every detail of the mistress's fake benevolence and calculated drama. Steen frantically demands a doctor while Ophelia watches them leave. Wrestling with guilt in her study, Ophelia decides she must apologize, just as a knock sounds at the door. Her legal advisor, Richard Cox, enters the room, greeting her with an urgent expression. Cox delivers a morning newspaper accusing Ophelia of abusing her husband's mistress, causing her to throw it in sheer disbelief. Fuming at the absurd article and questioning her marriage, Ophelia paces while Cox warns her that public opinion is critical in court. Cox advises her to control her temper during the trial, reminding her of their crucial legal strategy. Staring out the sunset window, Ophelia confirms she remembers his advice to endure, while Cox urges her to read the back for unexpected public support. While the lovers comfort each other, the narrative notes that their exposed affair is legally impossible to justify. Staring at the oppressive societal expectations regarding wifely morals, Ophelia scoffs at the unfair hypocrisy of the court. She walks quickly as the narrative lists the personal marital issues being weaponized against her. Losing her footing, Ophelia falls to the ground, crushed under the weight of the ridiculous accusations. Determined to win, Ophelia reviews their critical legal options as her advisor warns of the high stakes. Her legal advisor reassures her with strong counter-evidence, reigniting a flicker of hope in her heart. Sensing a window of opportunity, the advisor urges her to move quickly before the trial begins. As sunset gold bathes the majestic palace, cruel laughter echoes from within its highly secretive walls. Osteon Bryant fumes at the prince's mockery, complaining about the failed shopping trip to win her over. Seated regally on his golden throne, Prince Chesterford Erasmus praises the Countess's incredible audacity. But on the defensive, the blonde prince contemplates whether he must actively suppress the defiant Countess. The dark-haired Duke Bryant stands tense, his dark mood instantly giving away his frustration. Prince Chester's eyes gleam with surprise as he holds a highly mysterious sealed letter. Reading her bold response, the prince holds the document tightly as sweat beads on his hands. Back at her manor, a beautifully poised Ophelia reads a sudden royal tea party invitation. Knowing the battle is on, she urgently summons her loyal maid Anna to prepare. Glancing out the window, she prepares her ultimate strategy for entering the lion's den. Struck with absolute panic, her loyal maid struggles to process the sudden palace invitation. Shifting into a state of absolute focus, Anna demands to know the theme for the dress. Ophelia gracefully glides across the room, promising to reveal her perfect dress design by tomorrow. Inside the royal study, Duke Bryant leans in closely as the prince inspects the mysterious letter. Dressed in a breathtaking blue and white gown, Ophelia prepares to make her grand departure. Stepping forward in her elegant blue heels, she playfully jokes about the danger of the palace. Radiating confidence amidst blooming roses, she smiles brightly as she sets off on her high-stakes mission. Holding the invitation firmly, she boards her carriage with a fierce resolve to overrule the verdict. Looking down from the balcony, Prince Chester spots her exquisite golden carriage arriving at the courtyard. Staring in absolute awe, the blonde prince is stunned by her completely transformed, glamorous appearance. A wave of suspense builds as the palace servants wonder where the glamorous countess is heading. The carriage wheels clatter rhythmically against the gravel as she approaches the grand garden entrance. She is led into the heart of the imperial palace's breathtakingly beautiful manicured labyrinth. The Cushman presents the prestigious invitation to the palace guard to verify their noble identity. Confirming the credentials, the guard bows respectfully and calls for a guide to escort them. Ophelia steps into the magnificent lobby, her stunning gown perfectly complementing the opulent palace architecture. Walking elegantly through the sun-drenched conservatory, her steady steps echo her unwavering determination. Spotting her arrival, the smiling Prince Chester warmly notes her impeccable punctuality. The prince places a polite hand over his heart, greeting her with flawless royal etiquette. Ophelia curtsies with absolute grace, showing her respects to the high-ranking prince. With a polite gesture, the prince invites her to sit at a beautifully arranged tea table. Sitting across from him, she immediately addresses the duke's request to meet face-to-face. Ophelia politely offers her excuses while the prince waves them off with an easy smile. The prince defends his close friend, admitting the duke went about their business entirely wrong. Taking full responsibility for the misunderstanding, the prince catches her completely off guard. Chester sheepishly reveals that he was the one who jokingly recommended the jewelry and boutique shops. Ophelia is left utterly speechless as the bizarre truth behind the shopping trips is revealed. Letting out a polite laugh, she graciously accepts his explanation and dismisses any bad intentions. The handsome prince beams radiantly, deeply relieved by her understanding and pleasant response. Suddenly, his warm expression vanishes as his gaze turns incredibly sharp and business-focused. Getting straight to the point, Chester demands to purchase specific land sectors while she questions his interest. Glancing down strategically, Ophelia mentally celebrates as he claims he has a major business plan. Ophelia listens patiently as he explains the empire's economic split and the shift in noble occupations. She delivers a devastating counterpoint, pointing out the lack of large-scale art business and silencing him. Keeping her cool composure, she internally panics, wondering if her sharp deduction was too suspicious. The atmosphere becomes charged with tension as the high-stakes conversation reaches a critical turning point. The blonde prince's teacup slips from his hand, sweat pouring down his face in sheer disbelief at her genius. Keeping her thoughts to herself, Ophelia quickly dismisses the sudden change in her demeanor. Prince Chester gently asks if she is free to talk further, to which she eagerly agrees. Under the glass conservatory, the two sit down to continue their critical discussion. Back at the manor, Steen fumes in bed alongside his mistress, wondering where his wife has gone. Clenching his fists in growing frustration, Steen is consumed by resentment over her absence. The scheming blonde mistress grinds her teeth in anger, furious that Ophelia would dare leave her husband behind. Stepping away with a spring in her step, Ophelia happily celebrates successfully resolving the deal with the prince. Her brief moment of victory is suddenly interrupted as a familiar voice calls out her noble title. She turns around to find a handsome man dressed in a lavishly embroidered blue paisley vest. Gazing directly into the deep blue eyes of Duke Bryant, Ophelia stands completely stunned by his unexpected appearance. The winds of change blow through the imperial gardens as key players prepare to make their next moves. Earlier, Duke Bryant sits tensely in his grand office, desperately trying to focus on his paperwork. Flipping restlessly through his notebook, his mind remains completely consumed by the ongoing garden meeting. Worrying that the prince might say something highly inappropriate to the countess, he grows increasingly anxious. Staring ahead in deep contemplation, the dark-haired Duke wonders if he should personally intervene. Unable to resist his curiosity, he wanders into the gardens, frantically searching to see if they have finished. Spotting a sudden movement among the roses, he catches a glimpse of the elegant countess walking nearby. Bathed in soft light, the red-haired countess looks absolutely breathtaking in her elegant blue gown. Standing completely frozen, the dark-haired Duke is left thoroughly dazed and captivated by her beauty. Stuttering nervously, Duke Bryant is startled when Ophelia spots him and asks why he's there. The anxious Duke frantically asks if the prince said anything strange or if the meeting went poorly. Waving her hand dismissively, she smilingly reassures him that the conversation was incredibly pleasant and informative. Duke is visibly surprised, struggling to believe that their high-stakes meeting was just a simple tea time. Regaining his composure, Duke Bryant asks if she is finally heading back to her estate. Ophelia reveals she is planning to visit a highly reputed medical expert near the imperial palace. Seizing the opportunity, the countess asks if he could arrange a private consultation with his own family's physician. The scene shifts to the towering spires of the Grand Palace as preparations for their meeting begin. Smiling warmly, Duke Bryant eagerly promises to make all the necessary arrangements for her medical visit. Back in the palace corridors, Ophelia instructs her personal aide to temporarily hold off on preparing her carriage. She wisely requests a completely plain carriage without any family patterns to prevent any malicious high society rumors. Walking through the manicured grounds, she hopes that the Duke's prestigious doctor can shed light on her condition. Clenching the fabric of her skirt, she desperately prays to find a cure for her supposedly incurable fatal disease. Inside the medical study, Dr. Bruno reacts in utter shock, admitting he has never heard of such bizarre symptoms. As Ophelia details her suffering, the seasoned doctor confirms he has never treated anyone with black spots on their body. Realizing that even in this second life, the cause of her illness remains unknown, Ophelia's hope begins to fade. Flashing a sad, resigned smile, she quietly accepts that she is destined to die an early death once again. Suddenly, a young boy with brown hair bursts into the room, loudly telling her to get out of the study. The young disciple Edgard boldly declares that she is not sick but has been cursed by a shaman. While Dr. Bruno frantically tries to quiet his apprentice, Edgard fiercely insists his claims are absolutely true. Sensing a glimmer of truth, Ophelia sits upright and eagerly asks the boy to share all the details of the curse. Delighted by her attention, the young apprentice beams brightly and prepares to reveal the dark secret. The boy begins a grim tale about a poor ghetto where dangerous, curse-weaving shamans once lived. In this dark district, young children suddenly began to vanish one by one without a single trace. Fueled by absolute rage, an angry mob of villagers set out with torches to capture the perpetrator. However, the villagers were completely powerless to arrest him because the kidnapper was a wealthy nobleman. Oppressed by the unfair power of the aristocracy, the ghetto fell silent until a maid made a horrific discovery years later. The high-ranking nobleman's decaying corpse was found, bearing the exact same gruesome symptoms described by the countess. The local villagers immediately realized that this agonizing death was the work of a powerful, vengeful shaman's curse. Boy reveals that the reason for this targeted divine wrath was because the shaman's own sister was among the abducted children. Realizing the truth, Ophelia stands completely paralyzed with shock as she uncovers the terrifying secret behind her terminal illness. Shocked to her absolute core by the dark curse behind her terminal illness, Ophelia suddenly pales as her body falters. Masking her deep-seated panic, she weakly reassures the Duke before an ominous memory flashes before her eyes. The grand imperial estate stands cold and silent under a vast, glittering night sky. The seasoned physician apologetically admits his helplessness, promising to reach out if any breakthrough occurs. Sensing her overwhelming melancholy, the dark-haired Duke steals a quiet, intensely concerned glance. When the guilty Duke apologizes for wasting her time, she quickly and warmly reassures him. Deeply touched by her kindness, the Duke hesitates before preparing to make a surprising proposal. He nervously invites her to stay for dinner, catching her completely off guard. A tense hand clenches tightly, awaiting her fateful answer with bated breath. She lets out a delighted giggle, radiating elegance amidst blooming pink roses. Pacing slows and the atmosphere shifts as their dynamic takes a massive leap forward. Cheerful laughter echoes through the grand dining hall as they share a lavish banquet. Both confess how incredibly long it has been since they last enjoyed a peaceful meal. The handsome Duke looks across the table, his expression filled with genuine warmth. Raising her wine glass, she joyfully declares the evening to be absolutely perfect. Their glasses clink in a joyful toast, sealing a rare moment of peace. Back at the estate, a furious foot stomps in sheer impatience over her absence. Discovering her secret palace visit, Steen fumes in absolute disbelief over her sudden boldness. Clenching his fists, the enraged noble fears his wife has abandoned him forever. Overwhelmed by possessive fury, Steen accidentally cuts his hand on a broken teacup. He whirls around as his blonde mistress meekly explains she was trying to help. Staring down, the mistress notes the fresh blood welling from his sliced finger. She bandages his hand, softly chiding him to control his dangerous temper. Pacing relentlessly, Steen desperately debates whether to personally drag his wife back home. Staring at him, the mistress realizes with dread that Steen has completely changed. Clenching her skirt, the mistress trembles as she realizes his obsession is shifting. Ominous memories of their past schemes flood her mind, recalling his desperate search for power. In the past, his whispers of exclusive love seemed utterly genuine and secure. He had passionately vowed to make her a countess, no matter what. They had firmly bound their hands and fates together under the starry night sky. Trusting his golden promises of a bright future, she had patiently waited in the country. Powerless as a poor baron's daughter, she faced a bleak forced marriage without choices. Her isolation was suddenly shattered by the arrival of a mysterious, life-changing letter. Reading the messages, she believed their distant love remained entirely pure and unbreakable. Everything shifted overnight when news of the old Count's sudden demise arrived. Seizing the opportunity, Steen successfully claimed the title of the next Count. Reunited at last, she eagerly ran to greet her newly crowned found. Entering his massive estate, she believed all her quiet patience had finally paid off. It was there she first laid eyes on Ophelia, the tragic red-haired countess. Cruelly, the countess's misery became the key to the mistress's golden era. Steen had arrogantly demanded that his wife bow down to his new mistress. Standing together, the trio's toxic, tense dynamic was established in cold blood. Yet, Ophelia's sharp elegance completely defied everything Steen had claimed about her. When the divorce papers arrived, Steen's sudden coldness left his mistress trembling with anxiety. Realizing her position is threatened, she resolves to take matters into her own hands. Spotting his wife's carriage returning, Steen eagerly prepares to unleash his anger on her. Suddenly, a massive wave of dizziness hits Steen, making his vision blur. Collapse! Steen falls unconscious as his mistress whispers a cold apology for drugging him. Safe at her manor, Ophelia happily tells her maid about her long palace visit. The maid teasingly questions her about dining with the handsome duke, leaving Ophelia flustered. Just as the shadows of betrayal close in, a rush of long-lost memories suddenly hits Ophelia upon facing the duke. Looking to escape the heavy atmosphere, she teases her maid to keep their little walk a secret. But their lightheartedness vanishes instantly when they spot her husband's cunning mistress, Ariel, waiting on the staircase. Tensions flare as Ariel requests a private meeting, prompting Ophelia to calmly agree to a confrontation in the tea room. An oppressive, dark anxiety hangs over the estate as the countdown to their clash begins. Steeled for the encounter, Ophelia orders her startled maid to prepare refreshments for the unwanted guest. With her head held high, the red-haired countess boldly ascends the stairs to face her rival. Waiting at the table in her floral gown, the blonde mistress flashes a smug, self-satisfied smile. A battle of wits begins as Ariel expresses her desire to have an honest discussion. Wasting no time on pleasantries, Ophelia directly asks the mistress how long the affair with her husband has been going on. Ariel arrogantly refuses to answer, showing zero remorse for her shameless betrayal. Pushing her further, Ophelia demands to know if Ariel's parents are aware of her scandalous reputation. The blonde mistress falters slightly, admitting that her family has likely already heard the rumors. Ophelia then asks if she is truly prepared for the devastating fallout that lies ahead. She coldly reminds Ariel that while a wife merely gets divorced, a mistress is branded a social outcast forever. Defiantly stabbing her fork into a fruit tart, Ariel dismisses the warning with a mock thank you. She takes a slow bite of the dessert, completely unbothered by the looming threat of social ruin. Silence fills the room as Ariel smugly continues eating, confident in her position. Looking into her teacup, the mistress boldly claims that her lover will never abandon her, no matter the cost. Seeing her rival's blind delusion, Ophelia realizes that Ariel will never back down willingly. Sensing the futility of their talk, they finally agree to end the tense meeting as night falls. But disaster strikes later that night when Ariel suddenly collapses right after their tea time. The peaceful mansion is thrown into absolute chaos as the mistress's sudden medical emergency changes everything. A furious Steen storms into Ophelia's office, slamming his hands on her desk with murderous intent. He fiercely accuses her of deliberately feeding Ariel a pecan tart to trigger her severe nut allergy. Ophelia stands her ground, firing back that she had absolutely no idea the mistress possessed such an allergy. Refusing to listen, Steen accuses his wife of attempting murder out of pure bitter jealousy. Ophelia mocks his wild accusations, pointing out how utterly ridiculous his theories are. In a desperate attempt to assert control, Steen claims she is simply desperate to win back his affection. Disgusted by his arrogance, the countess turns away as her husband begins to leave the room. Nursing a growing headache, she demands he get out and stop screaming. Steen leaves her with a sinister smirk, warning her that she will regret refusing his terms. Slamming the door shut, he leaves the physically weakened countess stumbling in her study. Needing time to process the nightmare, Ophelia dismisses her loyal maid to be completely alone. She collapses onto her bed in exhaustion, the weight of the conspiracy crushing her spirit. The trap is sprung the next morning when a sensational tabloid accuses the countess of attempted murder. Vicious rumors spread like wildfire across the capital, thoroughly destroying her reputation. Her attorney Richard Cox visits daily, warning her that the divorce is now turned highly problematic. In the midst of this overwhelming stress, her maid suddenly breaks in with startling news. Duke Bryant has unexpectedly arrived at her mansion, sending the household staff into a flurry of whispers. Surprised but eager for his company, Ophelia instructs her maid to prepare for his arrival. She quickly changes into a fresh gown and descends the grand staircase to greet her ally. The Duke apologizes profusely for showing up unannounced at such a tumultuous time. Ophelia warmly reassures him, suggesting they move their conversation to the peaceful gardens outside. They stroll down to the estate's shimmering pond, finding a brief moment of tranquility. As they walk, the Countess asks what urgent business brought him to her estate to be. Duke Bryant reveals he was deeply concerned about her risky investments in the outer districts. Touched by his genuine care, Ophelia smiles and asks if he was truly worried about her well-being. The handsome Duke looks at her warmly, admitting his anxiety and praising her strength. But before they can celebrate her victory, her fatal disease flares up, leaving her gasping for breath as she falters. Suddenly losing her balance, the red-haired countess stumbles, but the handsome duke catches her in his arms. Trembling in his hold, she weakly apologizes for her sudden dizziness while he notes her pale face. Looking downcast, she admits she has been unwell, revealing that her high-stakes divorce trial is tomorrow. As the fateful date approaches, an overwhelming wave of anxiety and dread washes over her. Looking warmly at her, the black-haired duke gently reassures her that everything will be fine. A quiet moment passes between them in the lush gardens as the heavy tension lingers. Looking directly into her eyes, he passionately vows to support her no matter the outcome. Touched by his fierce loyalty, she feels a sudden relief, bringing a soft smile to his face. Even as comfort surrounds her, she silently braces herself for the looming trial ahead. Nearby, on a stone bridge, an observer notices a lady acting strangely above the water. In a sudden, horrifying moment, the pink-haired woman plunges backward into the deep river. Spotting the tragedy, the red-haired countess screams out in absolute panic for her to stop. The pink-haired vice-countess disappears beneath the cold, violent waves of the rushing water. Terrified, the red-haired countess frantically calls out for immediate help for the drowning woman. Without a moment of hesitation, the brave duke sprints forward to save the drowning stranger. A massive splash echoes through the air as the black-haired duke dives headfirst into the river. Gasping for air, the wet duke emerges, carrying the cold, unconscious pink-haired woman to safety. Countess frantically urges him to warm up, but he selflessly insists on her safety first. Kneeling beside the victim, they share a heavy, silent look of deep concern. Inspecting the unconscious woman, the Countess notices severe, dark bruises across her pale neck. Horrified, she immediately recognizes the undeniable, sickening signs of physical abuse on the victim. Recognizing the urgency, they decide to immediately move her to a lieutenant's house nearby. Arriving at the estate, they are met with startled questions about the mysterious woman's identity. A blonde woman named Isabella rushes to open the door as the Duke explains the emergency rescue. The Duke requests dry clothes for them, and Isabella quickly guides them to a guest room. Once inside, the red-haired countess introduces herself, learning their helpful host is Isabella. Isabella is instantly startled and wide-eyed upon hearing the famous countess's name. Countess strictly requests Isabella to keep today's dramatic rescue an absolute secret. Touching the victim's bruised face, the countess realizes this familiar woman has suffered a terrible tragedy. Understanding the grave situation, Isabella nods respectfully and promises to keep her silence. Leaving the estate as night falls, they resolve to protect the mysterious woman until she recovers. Walking away, the countess is still plagued by a haunting sense of familiarity. The next morning, the pink-haired woman wakes up in a panic, desperately trying to escape the maid. Bandaged and terrified, she screams that she only wants to be free from her living nightmare. Rushing out of the room, she insists she must return to her husband despite her injuries. Suddenly, the red-haired countess blocks her path, addressing her directly as Viscountess Camilla Martin. Stunned by her identity being known, Camilla collapses to the floor, clutching her head in agony. Her trembling hand hits the floor in a desperate, heartbreaking display of defeat. Kneeling beside her, the countess gently asks if she jumped into the river to end her life. Staring with absolute intensity, the countess is determined to uncover the monster behind her suffering. Tears stream down Camilla's face as her tragic past as the Marquis's daughter is revealed. The countess softly comforts the sobbing woman, urging her to rest before they speak further. In the past, Camilla was a beautiful noblewoman, deeply in love with her fiancé. Tragedy struck when her beloved fiancé suddenly died of a heart attack right before their wedding. Left in a state of absolute despair, Camilla's grieving parents desperately sought to help her heal. They soon introduced her to Viscount Martin, the seemingly kind man who promised to comfort her. But beneath his gentle smile, her new husband hid a truly sadistic, demonic nature. The dark truth is exposed. Every sickening bruise on her body was inflicted by his hands. Believing her family had completely abandoned her to this monster, a desperate Camilla chose to jump. Uncovering the horrifying abuse, her parents are left in agonizing, tearful regret over the forced marriage. Staring down at the tragic documents, Ophelia's heart sinks as the grim reality of the victim's past comes to light. Though they once stood as complete strangers in high society, fate has now bound their lives together in the most unexpected way. Knowing the sheer terror that Camilla faces, the Countess hesitates, realizing that sending her back to her abusive husband would be a death sentence. Driven by deep sympathy, Ophelia resolves to stand by the broken woman rather than turn a blind eye to her suffering. With burning determination, Ophelia vows to use every ounce of her power to save this poor fated soul from her living nightmare. The mere mention of returning to her abuser sends a jolt of pure terror through Camilla's trembling body. Though Camilla despondently insists she has no home to return to, Ophelia calmly hints at a secret strategy. Flashing a warm, confident smile, Ophelia asks for Camilla's complete trust as she sets her grand plan in motion. Days fly by in a blur of healing, and soon the fresh air of the courtyard offers a much-needed sanctuary. Strolling through the vibrant estate gardens, Camilla is surprised to see her savior approaching once again. Bringing warmth to a cold situation, Ophelia smiles gently and reveals she has a crucial gift to share. Outstretching her hand, Ophelia presents a long-awaited letter sent directly from Camilla's grieving parents. While giving her the freedom of choice, Ophelia strongly advises Camilla to read the emotional words written inside. Trembling with anticipation, Camila unfolds the parchment, her heart skipping a beat at the familiar ink. Tears well up as Camila immediately recognizes her mother's elegant script begging for forgiveness. A heavy weight of parental regret pours off the page, exposing their deep sorrow for failing to protect her. Though doubt initially lingers in Camila's mind, the letter passionately promises to uncover the dark truth behind her suffering. Every line of the letter aches with remorse, pleading for a chance to welcome their beloved daughter back home. Offering her ultimate freedom, her parents pledge to support her life and recovery unconditionally. Overcome by a sudden rush of unconditional love, Camila breaks down, crying tears of profound relief. The final words of the letter hit her like a wave, declaring her to be their absolute pride and joy. Clenching the precious letter tightly to her chest, Camila finally feels the heavy burden of abandonment melt away. With Camila's spirit slowly healing, the focus shifts back to the grand stage of high-stakes justice. The gavel of justice looms as the judge calls the courtroom to absolute order to deliver the final divorce verdict. In a crushing defeat for the greedy husband, Steen is stripped of his title and wealth, banished to the outskirts with only scraps. With the decisive strike of the wooden gavel, the marriage is legally dissolved once and for all. Sometime later, a stunning new lace jacket is unveiled, sparking excitement in the high fashion district. Behind the scenes, the boutique staff works tirelessly to manage their high society orders. Despite the lingering gossip, the passionate designer Kate eagerly coordinates her latest clothing shipment. Whispers fill the workshop as the assistants worry that the recent tabloids have heavily damaged the Countess's standing. Refusing to let her favorite patron suffer alone, Kate packs up her best work to offer comfort. The boutique staff watches in nervous anticipation, hoping this unexpected visit brings solace. Back at the quiet estate, a sudden knock on the study door interrupts the Countess's deep thoughts. The maid quickly announces Lady Kate's arrival and Ophelia immediately grants her entry. Bursting into the room with electric energy, Kate proudly presents her latest creations to lift Ophelia's spirits. Spreading the gorgeous, vibrant garments across the floor, Kate excitedly urges her to try them on. Amused by her friend's loud enthusiasm, Ophelia raises a hand to gently quiet the room. Tense silence fills the room as Kate begins to worry that she may have overstepped her boundaries. But the tension instantly shatters as Ophelia breaks into a warm, genuinely grateful smile. Kate watches in utter disbelief, amazed by how incredibly resilient the Countess truly is. Reassured by her idol's strength, a spark of inspiration reignites inside the passionate designer's heart. Seizing Ophelia's hands in deep admiration, Kate vows to pour her entire soul into her work. Looking out the window, Ophelia confesses she is actually thrilled with the final court verdict. Though the desperate Steen plans to appeal, his hollow threats no longer hold any power over her. With her freedom secured, Ophelia turns her focus to high-stakes political and economic moves that will change the empire. The grand premiere of the district's most anticipated fashion boutique finally arrives. Stepping outside, Kate reassures her worried staff that their VIP client was absolutely thrilled. Inside, the Countess proves to be a brilliant business mind, thoroughly dissecting every single design detail. Kate realizes that behind the noble title lies a powerhouse business partner with unmatched focus. Fully charged with a brand new purpose, the design crew cheers in triumph, ready to take the fashion world by storm. Just when she thought her plans were secure, a new mystery emerges. Her butler arrives just in time to offer her a comforting cup of coffee. The butler presents a letter, hinting at an unexpected development from the palace. The letter is revealed to be a direct summons from the second prince. They discuss the second prince's inquiry regarding an upcoming charity event. She recognizes this high society event as her chance to elevate her family status. The butler announces that the count is finally returning to the estate. The butler promises to prepare the carriage for tomorrow's crucial journey. Intrigued by the strange letter, she decides she must attend the charity event. Exasperated by the busy day, she stretches and prepares for bed. She walks gracefully through the silent, dimly lit hallways of her mansion. She enjoys the newfound peace of the house now that Steen is gone. Memory reveals Steen being exiled from the household under a dark cloud. A blonde woman clings to Steen, desperate and crying as he departs. A carriage carries them away, fulfilling her wish to never see him again. Under the starry night, she hopes their fates are forever untied. A window slams shut with a loud crash, breaking the silence. Her maid rushes in to announce that her expected companion has arrived. She prepares herself, surrounded by elegant gowns and jewelry for the evening. Duke Brian stands in the doorway, caught completely off guard. Duke Brian explains that he came as her companion in the prince's stead. He checks on her well-being while she realizes his true underlying motive. She warmly accepts, recalling a lighthearted promise that turned out to be real. They agree to meet tonight, exchanging polite bows to seal the arrangement. She prepares to face high society for the first time since her divorce. A brief interlude signals a dramatic pause before the grand evening begins. Under the brilliant night sky, they note how early they have both arrived. Duke Brian turns around to greet her as they meet outside. An air of quiet anticipation hangs over them under the starlight. The Duke looks at her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Inside, the grand ballroom stands spectacularly illuminated and packed with guests. The wealthy elite chatter loudly, their voices echoing through the hall. Outside, a carriage screeches to a sudden halt, drawing immediate attention. The guests whisper in judgment, wondering who would arrive in such a carriage. The crowd gasps in sheer disbelief as the carriage door opens.
Duke Osteon Bryant steps out, checking his pocket watch and apologizing for his lateness.
He waves to the crowd, gesturing to the prominent guest arriving behind him. A vibrant red gown and elegant heels step out onto the floor. The surrounding guests are struck mute with utter astonishment at the sight. Countess Ophelia enters looking absolutely radiant, instantly capturing the entire room's focus. She looks up at the whispering balconies, unfazed by the sudden attention. Holding her close, Steen knows their scandalous pairing will set off a media frenzy. They walk through the crowd together, ignoring the intense murmurs of the guests. The onlookers point and whisper in shock at the Duke's unexpected partner. A nobleman eagerly greets the Duke, surprised to see him at the ceremony. She decides to take a walk, leaving him to handle his social duties. As she walks away, cruel whispers mock her divorce and accuse her of greed. The dark silhouettes of the crowd ruthlessly gossip about her broken marriage. The spiteful noblewoman maliciously suggests that her husband has already replaced her. Clutching her gown, her hand trembles as the toxic rumors push her to the limit. Whispers of high society scandal ignite as the red-haired countess prepares her next devastating counterattack. The supportive noblewomen fiercely defend the countess, calling out the malicious gossipers for their pathetic backstabbing whispers. The loyal ally loudly declares that her husband's mistress won't ever dare speak to her again, shocking the onlookers. Baroness Sven panics as the vocal ally publicly exposes her marital hypocrisy, leaving her absolutely humiliated. Chaos erupts in the ballroom as the guests turn on the instigators, calling them hypocrites for their confidence. The mustache man tries to intervene to stop the noisy confrontation, but his protests are met with mocking dismissal. Amidst the pointing fingers and deafening chatter, the red-haired countess remains completely unbothered. The narrow-minded noblewomen whisper in disgust, calling her crazy for daring to sue her own husband. A subtle, knowing smile creeps across the countess's lips. Turning the tables, the countess sweet-talks her detractors by publicly asking how much they plan to donate to the charity event. Ophelia casually shrugs off the tension while her loyal allies praise her brilliant retort. Ophelia expresses her heartfelt gratitude, confessing that having them on her side gives her immense strength. The blonde noblewoman expresses her deepest admiration, calling Ophelia a beacon of hope for suffering wives everywhere. Suddenly bombarded with endless questions about her successful divorce, the countess can only smile at their sudden curiosity. The eager crowd of women crowd around her, excitedly plotting strategies to catch deceitful husbands red-handed. Black-haired Duke watches quietly from a distance as the chaotic noise finally starts to subside. The sparkling countess turns her head, noticing a familiar presence nearby. The Duke's heart skips a beat as the countess suddenly addresses him, catching him off guard. The concerned gentleman notices the Duke's flushed complexion and asks if he is feeling all right. His heart races frantically as his cheeks flush a deep crimson. When the women invite her to spend the day together, Ophelia politely prepares to decline. Ophelia gracefully gestures toward the Duke, introducing him as her companion for the evening. Bidding her friends a warm farewell, Ophelia takes her leave alongside the handsome Duke. The noblewomen squeal in excitement, realizing this is the very first time they have ever seen the stoic Duke escorting a woman. As the pair walk arm in arm, the whispers of romance follow them down the grand corridor. The successful charity event concludes perfectly, solidifying the immense power and influence of the Heavenwalker family. The event generates massive attention, exceeding even the Countess's highest expectations. Laughter fills the air as the successful trio celebrates their victory. Under the tranquil starry night sky, a heavy sigh of exhaustion escapes as the long day ends. Walking through the quiet estate, Ophelia expresses her happiness, to which the Duke warmly replies. The Duke apologizes sincerely, wishing he had reacted much faster to prevent the dramatic ballroom commotion. Ophelia quickly waves her hands to dismiss his worries, assuring him it was nothing more than a minor incident. The Duke gently requests that she call upon him next time she needs help, promising to do his absolute best. Breaking the comfortable silence, Ophelia hesitatingly reveals that she actually has a favor to ask of him. The Duke is left utterly bewildered when Ophelia suddenly asks to borrow the private lake from their previous walk. The Duke is startled as Ophelia explains she caught a golden carp but needs a much larger lake to house it properly. Delighted by his compliance, Ophelia happily announces her plans to visit his mansion tomorrow, which he readily accommodates. The next day, the Duke is completely dumbfounded upon seeing the sheer, unbelievable size of the carp. Ophelia proudly presents the legendary giant carp True Modus, explaining just how difficult it was to capture such a beast. While the Duke marvels at her efforts, Ophelia beams with pride, boasting that she won the fierce competition to acquire it. She reveals that she secured the legendary fish at the exclusive Power auction after learning of its rare appearance. The Duke finally realizes she acquired the giant fish via auction. The Duke assumes she caught it for the second prince, but Ophelia shocks him by declaring her intention to gift it to the queen. The scene shifts to the ailing queen, who has fallen desperately ill with severe complications right before her son's birthday. The Duke ponders in confusion, wondering how on earth a giant carp could possibly help cure a critically ill royal. With a mysterious, brilliant smile, Ophelia reveals that she never intended for the queen to simply look at the fish. The Duke gasps in utter confusion at her unexpected declaration. Meanwhile, at the palace, the overwhelmed second Prince Bryant struggles under a massive pile of work right before his birthday. Frustrated, the prince laments how the king has abandoned state affairs to worry over the queen, leaving him with an impossible workload. The Duke coldly reprimands the prince for speaking lightly of his mother's suffering before heartlessly walking out on him. The dark-haired gentleman opens the door to announce it is time to feed the carp. He reaches out to open another door while holding a large file folder. A loud slam startles the blonde prince as he sits overwhelmed behind stacks of papers. Below the surface, several fish swim peacefully as bubbles rise through the water. Crouching by the water, the dark-haired gentleman remarks that the carp has gained weight. Smiling gently, the dark-haired gentleman tells the carp they must say goodbye tomorrow. A book on the grass indicates it is finally time for the fish to play its part. The next morning, a grand castle stands tall under a clear, whispering sky. Palace maids whisper anxiously, noting that the prince must be feeling incredibly sad. Another maid chimes in, explaining that the sorrow spreads beyond just the prince. The worried king peers from behind a wall, sighing heavily in deep distress. Inside the quiet bedroom, the ailing queen lies weak, letting out a painful groan. Standing outside, the guilty king laments his inability to face his suffering wife. An older maid delivers a massive Turrimatus fish gifted by Count Heavenwalker. The shocked king gasps in utter disbelief at the sight of the delivery. A flashback reveals Ophelia clarifying she never intended the fish to be just looked at. Ophelia explains she learned a crucial secret about the fish from her merchant father. A close-up of Ophelia's determined face as she speaks the name, Turrimatus. She notes that the legendary fish is historically a vital ingredient for healing dishes. The dark-haired gentleman is stunned, staring at her in complete surprise. Ophelia explains that the special soup restores vital vigor, especially after giving birth. Kneeling on the grass, the dark-haired gentleman realizes the fish is meant for cooking. Ophelia smiles warmly, confirming that the rare creature is indeed meant for culinary preparation. A rich bowl of steaming soup is served on an elegant royal table. The king lovingly encourages the hesitant queen to try the unfamiliar Turrimatus soup. The queen reluctantly takes a small spoonful of the warm miraculous broth. Her eyes instantly widen in complete shock as she tastes the soup. The spoon drops to the floor as the panicked king asks if she is all right. Back at the estate, the dark-haired gentleman sits nervously, consumed by extreme anxiety. Ophelia stands elegantly, showcasing her stunning new yellow and blue floral gown. The gentleman nervously notes the emperor has never urgently summoned anyone like this before. Ophelia remains calm, pointing out that soldiers would have arrived if it were an emergency. Reassuring him, she smiles and requests his escort as she knows what lies ahead. The gentleman sits in tense silence inside the carriage as they travel. A dramatic title card transitions the scene to the next phase of her plan. The narrative shifts to the Grand Palace, announcing the arrival of Countess Heavenwards. Entering the lavish hall, Ophelia performs a graceful curtsy to greet the emperor. Hurried footsteps echo as Ophelia formally introduces herself to the imperial presence. The enthusiastic king rushes forward, eagerly grabbing her hands in excitement. He praises the miraculous soup, thanking her for saving the failing health of the empress. The king loudly declares she accomplished what the entire imperial palace could not. He confesses his long-standing guilt over the empress's chronic illness and canceled celebrations. Walking away, he sadly admits that being a bad father has weighed him down. The emperor turns back to Ophelia, offering to grant her absolutely anything she desires. Ophelia modestly declines a reward, but the eager emperor insists she name her price. Seizing the moment, Ophelia requests a favor, which the emperor eagerly agrees to hear. The emperor is struck with absolute shock at her request to nominate her successor. Ophelia explains she is divorcing and has no children to inherit her family estate. While the emperor argues she is too young, she notes the future is unpredictable. Clenching her dress, Ophelia drops a massive bombshell, claiming she is destined to die soon. Just when the dust settles, the gold-haired emperor in a majestic red cloak cautiously accepts a delicate request, hoping a dire scenario never comes to pass. Back at the palace, the red-haired countess in a ruffled yellow dress probes to see if her companion has any other desires. Sensing a perfect opportunity, the countess pauses thoughtfully as an ingenious plan suddenly pops into her mind. Overflowing with excitement, the red-haired countess eagerly boasts to the dark-haired duke about the sparkling gifts bestowed upon her by the emperor. The dark-haired duke gently teases her about her obvious delight in the imperial gifts, assuring her that everything will be fine. Framed by a blooming pink rose, the countess passionately defends her bold actions, stating they are necessary to restore her family's honor. Touched by her unwavering determination, the duke tenderly advises her not to overwork herself in her grand pursuit. Their intimate conversation is abruptly shattered when an elderly man with gray hair and a mustache suddenly calls out to them. The red-haired countess is stunned to find Dr. Bruno standing right before them, who quickly explains he was attending a medical meeting. Eager for answers, the countess turns to the doctor to hear what crucial information he has discovered. With a grave expression, Dr. Bruno delivers bad news, warning that the strange symptoms she described match a rare, untreatable endemic disease. Clinging to hope, the countess puts on a brave face, resolving to continue their desperate medical investigation regardless of the difficulty. With a heavy heart, the gray-haired doctor excuses himself to attend his meeting, leaving a lingering sense of dread behind. Walking through the grand garden, a heavy, gloomy aura surrounds the countess as she laments the cruel, unyielding hand of fate. The dark-haired duke quietly joins her, expressing deep concern over the shocking severity of the mystery illness. Masking her deep sorrow, the red-haired countess forces a wry smile and tries to dismiss the devastating news as expected. Suddenly, the duke stops her in her tracks, sharply questioning if this lethal disease is secretly affecting her. Looking down with intense worry, the duke notes her unusually hyper-focused obsession with this rare affliction. Turning away from him, the countess is left speechless as the duke directly asks if she has already contracted the fatal illness. Turning back with a forced laugh, she desperately tries to play down her panic, claiming it was nothing more than idle curiosity. Sensing her rising distress, the dark-haired Duke instantly backs off, offering a sincere apology for overstepping his bounds. Eager to escape the suffocating tension, the Countess hurriedly sweeps toward the carriage, urging him to depart immediately. But disaster strikes in an instant as her foot slips on the carriage step with a sharp, echoing thud. Before she can hit the ground, the dark-haired Duke sweeps her up in a sudden, breathtakingly dramatic embrace. Staring up in absolute shock, the red-haired Countess quickly tries to break the tension by claiming the broken carriage step needs immediate repair. Regaining her footing, she softly thanks him as she safely steps inside the elegant wooden carriage. Settling onto the plush seats, the Countess curiously inquires about their next destination, breaking the heavy silence. Looking back at her with a gentle smile, the Duke asks if she would prefer to head straight home or explore somewhere else. Flustered by his open invitation, the Countess clutches her chest as her heart begins to thump wildly at the unexpected options. Meanwhile, back in his study, a massive stack of unfinished paperwork sits neglected on the desk. Unable to focus, the dark-haired Duke is completely consumed by memories of their brief, intense exchange by the carriage door. He closes his eyes as the vivid image of their sudden, close embrace flashes wildly through his mind, throwing him off balance. Even her flustered excuses about fixing the carriage step replay in his head, fueling his growing distraction. Seated at his grand desk, the Duke sighs in defeat, utterly unable to concentrate on his imperial state affairs. Clutching his pounding chest, the flustered Duke steps out of his stuffy study to catch his breath. The blinding sunlight flashes in his eyes, but it does nothing to clear his mind of the captivating Countess. Looking out over the balcony, he watches the dazzling sunlight reflect off the sparkling blue waters of the estate pond. He suddenly recalls a legendary figure who once resided near these serene waters, sparking a brilliant connection. Sweet memory flashes of the Countess leaning in close, softly requesting a highly unusual favor from him. She had politely asked to borrow the very same pond they had once walked beside together. The memory of her radiant, sparkling smile in a striking red gown completely captivates his thoughts once more. Her brilliant scheme to outmaneuver the Empress by keeping the asset secret replays in his mind, highlighting her incredible cunning. Wallowing in his sweet torment on the balcony, the dark-haired Duke blushes intensely, unable to stop thinking about her. Walking down the elegant hallway, he marvels at her sheer intelligence and unmatched skill. Staring back out at the glittering pond, he softly wonders what his brilliant partner is doing at this very moment. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the Countess's bedroom, where she lies restlessly on her bed, her mind equally occupied. Wallowing face down in her sheets, she groans in sheer frustration, unable to concentrate on her book after her embarrassing carriage slip-up. She vividly recalls his deeply confused expression, making her face burn with absolute mortification. Kicking her legs in a hysterical fit of embarrassment, the red-haired Countess screams at herself for acting so ridiculously in front of him. Waving her hands in despair, she hides her face, completely overwhelmed by her rapidly growing feelings for the handsome Duke. A sudden, powerful embrace from the handsome Duke catches the flustered Countess completely off guard. Back in her chambers, Ophelia smiles warmly as she recalls his surprising physical strength. She happily wonders if his stamina comes from intense exercise when her butler suddenly enters. Screaming in shock at the butler's sudden arrival, she receives a polite reminder to stay safe. Settled on her bed, Ophelia listens as Jackson reports that both morning letters have been successfully delivered. Ophelia is pleased with the confirmation, but the butler hesitates, indicating a serious issue remains. The butler delivers a shocking update, explaining that while one letter was welcomed, the other was immediately destroyed. Deep in thought, Ophelia processes the news as Jackson promises to keep her informed of any developments. Narration reveals her immediate plans to foster a successor, choosing 2 potential children from her branch family. A sparkling crest signifies her intent to name one of these young candidates as her official heir. Overwhelmed by the sudden administrative headache, Ophelia collapses back onto her bed with a dramatic groan. She resolves to settle this successor crisis immediately, knowing she must prepare for the future. Turning back to her butler, Ophelia calls out to him with sudden, urgent determination. Despite the late hours, she demands her carriage be prepared for an immediate departure. Under the cover of darkness, the carriage speeds away through the forest to confront the issue. Ophelia notes that the first candidate, Noah Winters, happily agreed to meet her at the estate. Looking at the torn letter, she suspects the second child's family is intentionally keeping him away. As the carriage arrives, she resolves to meet the second child directly and convince him herself. Stepping down into the dark night, the groom cautions her to watch her footing. Harsh, commanding shout echoes from inside the house, ordering someone to stop instantly. Opening the door, Ophelia is horrified to find a bruised, silver-haired boy kneeling in terror. A loud slam echoes as an abusive guardian warns her to stay away from the child. Gasps of shock fill the room as she witnesses the undeniable evidence of physical abuse. Furious at the horrific sight, Ophelia immediately demands her servants call a doctor. Kneeling beside the trembling boy, she gently addresses him as Everett Cotton. The frightened, silver-haired boy looks up with tearful yellow eyes, wondering where he is. Outraged, Ophelia confronts the abusive man, demanding to know what he has done. The unkempt man lunges forward, accusing her of being a corrupt, child-stealing noble. Shielding the boy, Ophelia firmly declares that Everett is coming to live at her mansion. The angry man screams at her to leave his house, accusing her of telling lies. Unshaken, she coldly promises to charge him with the severe crime of child abuse. Glaring at him, she dares him to say another word while protecting the crying boy. Cowardly guardian panics, realizing he has no defense against her powerful accusations. Defeated and terrified of the law, the man screams at her to take the boy away. Shifting back to the carriage, Ophelia sighs with relief now that the rescue is complete. She reflects on her impulsive actions, admitting she simply had to get the boy to a doctor. Looking out the window, she reaffirms her decision to intervene and protect an abused child. The carriage wheels rattle loudly as they finally return to the safety of the estate. Entering the mansion, Ophelia instructs her head maid to settle the traumatized boy comfortably. The maid informs her that the other candidate, Noah, has also just arrived. Ophelia stands tall, relieved that both boys are now safe inside her estate. She silently hopes they can get along and wonders if she can raise them well. Deep in thought, she considers the heavy responsibility of taking care of these children. Shaking off her doubts, she pumps her fists, refusing to think negatively about their future. Under the starry night, she vows to invest whatever it takes to support them fully. The scene shifts to hands preparing a child's outfit, emphasizing the importance of first impressions. The elegant headmaid instructs the boys to follow her to meet the master of the house. Behind her grand desk, Countess Ophelia sits ready to welcome her potential heirs. The maid announces to the children that the Countess has been waiting for their arrival. The doors open as the blonde boy and the nervous silver-haired boy enter with their guide. A high-stakes battle for the family succession begins as the confident blonde-haired Noah Winner introduces himself as a top candidate. In stark contrast, the shy silver-haired Everett Cotton bows politely, revealing his timid and quiet nature. Seated elegantly, Countess Ophelia announces her grand plan to invest heavily in training the ultimate heir to the Heavenwards family. To oversee their education, the stern, pink-haired Mrs. Catherine is appointed to lead their fundamental training. Ophelia leaves the boys to explore the massive mansion under the careful guidance of her attentive maids. As they begin their new lives, Ophelia checks in on their progress, wondering how they are adjusting. She reflects on Everett's lack of a formal education, noting his difficult past of only receiving sporadic tutoring from librarians. Mrs. Catherine stands ready in her office, prepared to execute her strict educational regime. A beautiful cluster of red roses sets the scene as the tutor's official class diary begins to document their journey. The diaries reveal that the brilliant blonde boy Noah immediately wins over the mansion's staff with his quick adaptation. Meanwhile, a lonely Everett looks on in sadness, struggling to find his place in this overwhelming new environment. In the classroom, Everett visibly struggles to keep up with the intense pace of the lessons compared to his rival. A massive stack of advanced books highlights Everett's desperate desire to match the exact same level of study as Noah. Worried about potential friction, the tutor discusses the delicate balance of their education with the Countess to avoid feelings of discrimination. After a grueling lesson, Everett sits alone and dejected as the tutor dismisses the class for the day. Summoning his courage, Everett timidly stands up to ask a lingering question about the material. In stark contrast, Noah confidently thanks the teacher, showing off his seamless understanding of the curriculum. Mrs. Catherine gently advises Everett to stay consistent with his homework so he doesn't fall further behind. As Everett bows politely, Noah casts a cold, piercing glare in his direction, hinting at a growing rivalry. Everett senses the icy tension, turning around with a look of quiet confusion and anxiety. In private, Noah unleashes a venomous verbal assault, mocking Everett's distant bloodline and dismissing him as a worthy competitor. With a sinister, mocking smile, Noah ruthlessly pressures the dejected silver-haired boy to give up his candidacy entirely. The looming shadows of family expectation and rivalry deepen as the struggle for the inheritance intensifies. Noah stands proudly in a lush garden, fully embracing his identity as a distinguished student of the noble estate. A stack of perfect test scores proves Noah's exceptional academic prowess and his lifelong enthusiasm for learning. Noah revels in the adoration of the household staff, realizing he has completely monopolized their favor. Holding his pen with a smug grin, the ambitious blonde boy remains confident that the succession is rightfully his. He watches with satisfaction as Everett is cornered and scolded by the tutor for his unfinished homework. Looking down on his rival, Noah questions why such a weak, sad boy was ever brought to the estate in the first place. Scattered papers on the floor symbolize Everett's chaotic struggle, yet he stubbornly refuses to leave despite constant pressure. Noah's expression turns utterly scornful as he views the silver-haired boy as completely incompetent. Everett's constant presence begins to irritate Noah, who feels restricted by having to share the spotlight. The relentless pressure peaks as the silent demand for Everett to pack his bags and leave echoes through the estate. A brief interlude highlights the shifting dynamics and rising tension within the Grand Mansion walls. During a lavish dinner, Noah proudly boasts about his flawless test scores, earning praised reactions from a delighted Ophelia. Noah continues to chatter excitedly about his fun writing lessons, while Ophelia listens with a pleased and amused smile. As Noah dramatically vows to work hard to repay her kindness, a hesitant Everett sits quietly, barely touching his food. Sensing his distress, Everett waves his hands frantically to insist he simply has no appetite. Ophelia speaks to him with deep warmth, gently encouraging the growing boy to eat well out of genuine motherly concern. Everett offers a shy, grateful smile, which Ophelia finds absolutely adorable, while Noah glares coldly in the background. Excusing herself to attend to her duties, the elegant Countess wishes both boys a pleasant evening. Walking down the grand hallway, Ophelia fondly reflects on how wonderfully cooperative and angelic both children are. Her heart swells with optimism as she resolves to maintain this peaceful household moving forward. Feeling lighthearted, she playfully contemplates treating herself to some fine wine to celebrate the quiet evening. With a day off ahead, Ophelia happily approaches her chambers, looking forward to a relaxing night. Suddenly, she freezes in her tracks as harsh, cruel voices filtering through the door shatter her peaceful mood. Peering inside, she witnesses Noah aggressively pointing his finger at Everett's head, criticizing his intelligence and worth. Noah continues his ruthless bullying, taunting the silent, trembling Everett about when he will finally be kicked out. Enraged by the horrific abuse happening right under her roof, Ophelia slams the door open, her furious scream echoing down the hall. A terrified and deeply startled Noah spins around in sheer panic, caught red-handed in the middle of his cruel act. Tension explodes as the red-haired countess fiercely demands to know why Noah committed such a misdeed.
Sweating profusely under her intense gaze, Noah struggles to find an excuse for his actions.
A sudden, violent crash shatters the silence as a porcelain teacup smashes on the floor. Noah cowers on the floor in terror while she frantically checks on his safety. Overcome with panic, the countess urgently orders her staff to summon a doctor. Distraught by the chaos, she buries her face in her hands, blaming herself. She releases a heavy, exhausted sigh, wishing she had managed the boys better.
Standing firm, she sternly places a terrified Noah on immediate probation.
A temporary lull settles over the grand estate as the shocking incident concludes. Under the serene night sky, the magnificent palace stands illuminated by glowing lights. Looking up at the ceiling, she laments how incredibly difficult it is to raise boys. Desperate for guidance, she deeply wishes for a mature male figure's sound advice. She ponders potential candidates who could assist her with the children. A vivid image of the handsome Duke Ostian suddenly flashes in her mind, making her heart race. She blushes furiously, scolding herself for letting her mind wander to him. Staring out the dark window, she realizes she hasn't seen him in a long time. The scene shifts to colorful sweets and a collection of charming wooden toys. A vibrant, festive toy shop stands invitingly on the bustling city street. Inside, a happy couple cheerfully browses the rows of toys. The red-haired countess stands quietly in front of a shelf, observing the toy trains. She turns with a gentle smile to ask about the condition of the merchandise. Lifting a small wooden cage, she is suddenly startled by a familiar voice greeting her. She turns to find the dashing Duke Ostian standing right before her. Startled by his sudden presence, she lets out a loud squeal of surprise. Earlier that day, a servant delivers an urgent letter to Duke Ostian's grand estate. A peaceful garden gazebo stands quiet beside the sparkling blue waters. Inside his office, the servant hands the newly arrived correspondence to the busy Duke. The Duke's eyes widen in surprise upon seeing Countess Heavenward's name on the envelope. The maid quietly steps back, noting how rarely the Duke takes a break. Duke Ostian politely requests to be left alone so he can work quietly. Bowing respectfully, the maid happily leaves him to his private thoughts. With undivided attention, the Duke eagerly prepares to read the mysterious message. The letter opens with her explaining her recent sponsorship of 2 young boys.
She admits in the letter that managing them has been far from easy.
She earnestly requests a brief meeting to discuss her ongoing parenting struggles. She promises to await his arrival at their designated meeting spot. Outside the toy shop, the afternoon sun shines brightly on the decorated entrance. A dramatic title screen signals a crucial turning point in their relationship. Inside the shop, the Countess details the recent parenting mishap to the listening Duke. Clutching a wooden duck, she wonders how to repair the boys' fractured relationship. Duke Ostian chuckles, advising her that teenage boys prefer respect over coddling. He asks if she has discussed the exact terms of the sponsorship with them. She assures him that she clearly outlined the details from day one. Looking at a toy robot, she notes the importance of finding their unique talents. The Duke explains the vague expectations only create unnecessary pressure on the youth. She worries deeply about the fierce competition brewing between the 2 boys. She tightly holds the wooden robot, feeling overwhelmed by her motherly duties. He gently checks if she disagrees with his straightforward advice. With absolute confidence, Duke Ostian asks her to trust him with the children's education. She stares at him in sheer disbelief, stunned by his bold and unexpected proposal. Confidence radiates from Countess Heavenwards as she boldly claims she can complete her intense mission in just a single week. An aura of intense disbelief hangs in the air, questioning how such an impossible feat can actually be achieved. Under a dazzling night sky, the magnificent palace stands illuminated, ready for a major turning point. Inside the Grand Library, Duke Ostian gathers Noah and Everett, preparing to share a legendary historical tale. The Duke details a legendary hunt where the founding emperor captured a defenseless baby roe deer. Everett listens intently as the Duke explains how a sympathetic servant named Suha chose to set the creature free. Standing in the center of the classroom, the Duke commands Noah to speak first on the matter. The blonde-haired Noah confidently questions whether the disobedient servant should have faced severe punishment for his betrayal. With a sharp flash in his eyes, Duke Ostian challenges Noah on whether keeping silent was truly the right path. Caught completely off guard, the blonde boy freezes in shock as his confident theories are instantly dismantled. The Duke continues his tale, revealing that the Emperor actually rewarded the merciful servant with a prestigious royal duty.
This profound lesson suggests that the Emperor recognized Suha's innate compassion as the perfect quality for raising children.
Sitting in silent contemplation, the gray-haired Everett absorbs the deep wisdom of the historical parable. Duke Ostian nods in approval, defining true leadership as the ability to place trustworthy people in their rightful positions. Crossing his arms in a display of ultimate authority, the Duke defines this rare quality as the core of tolerance. Noah hangs his head in defeat, completely exhausted and overwhelmed by the heavy academic pressure. Standing alone in a dark void of self-doubt, Noah laments his failure during his very first royal lesson. Glancing back at the boys, the Duke notes that everyone possesses entirely different values. Everett lets out a weary sigh, struggling to catch his breath under the heavy expectations of the classroom. Observing them silently from his desk, the Duke remains focused on analyzing their contrasting mindsets. Walking through her estate, Countess Heavenwards reflects on the massive intellectual gap between her two young wards. Everett diligently focuses on his schoolwork, proving his stubborn determination to succeed despite the steep learning curve. Meanwhile, Noah's towering self-esteem leads him to smugly ignore Everett's hardworking efforts. Duke Osteon carefully evaluates the situation, identifying Everett's relentless drive as a symptom of a deep-seated anxiety. Sharing his discoveries, the Duke warns the startled Countess that the gray-haired boy is trying far too hard to prove himself. Concluding their meeting, they agree that helping Everett rebuild his self-esteem will resolve his obsessive behavior. But the Duke warns that once Everett finds stability, Noah will face a massive psychological hurdle. He explains that the only solution is to push Noah mentally to shatter his stubborn arrogance. The Duke rests his chin on his hand, plotting a rigorous and transforming educational strategy for the boys. Back in his room, Noah collapses face first onto his bed, celebrating the temporary end of the grueling day. Rolling over, the blonde boy stares at the ceiling, dreading the long days of intense training ahead. He laments his growing isolation, fearing there is no rightful place left for him in this grand estate. Clutching the bedsheets in deep anxiety, Noah worries about how he will survive the upcoming lessons. Suddenly, the heavy silence of the night is shattered by the soft creaking of his bedroom door.
Everett quietly slips inside, holding a plate with a fresh slice of cake after noticing Noah skip dinner.
Taking tentative steps into the dark room, Everett approaches his classmate with a late-night offering. He gently places the dessert down, telling Noah to eat whenever he feels ready. Just as Everett turns to leave, a startled Noah desperately calls out to stop him. Everett looks back in absolute surprise, shocked by the sudden crack in Noah's cold facade. 1 week later, Countess Heavenward stands anxiously in her room as a sudden knock sounds at the door. The maid opens the door, expressing surprise at finding the Countess already awake so early in the morning. The Countess admits her restless anxiety, unable to sleep on the day the children are scheduled to return. Stealing her resolve, the red-haired Countess attempts to put on a reassuring and hopeful smile. The maid attempts to reassure her, but the Countess remains deeply concerned about the outcome of the training. She voices her persistent worries, wondering if the boys could have truly changed in such a remarkably short time. Looking up at the clear sky, she silently prays that the results of the Duke's lesson are positive. Elegant red script marks a dramatic shift as the tension peaks before the family reunion. Heading out to the balcony, the maid joyfully announces that the carriage has finally arrived at the gates. A crisp, echoing thud sounds as a polished black boot steps firmly onto the stone pavement. Bursting through the garden archway hand in hand, Noah and Everett run forward with radiant, united smiles to greet their beloved guardian. An impossible miracle unfolds right before her eyes as the bitter rivals return completely transformed. The red-haired Countess warmly welcomes her young wards back, overjoyed by their unexpectedly polite behavior. Her breath hitches in shock as she suddenly spots the enigmatic man standing behind him. Duke Osteon greets her with a knowing, highly charismatic smile. In a rare moment of brotherly playfulness, the boys gently tease each other while the adults talk. The Countess eagerly asks the Duke how he managed to break through their stubborn defenses. He gently explains that young minds adapt swiftly when given the right guidance. The secret of their reconciliation is revealed in a dramatic flashback to their tense bedroom confrontation. Unable to contain his frustration any longer, the gray-haired Everett loudly demands answers. Noah trembles under the weight of his own guilt, struggling to find the right words. Everett confronts his rival directly, demanding to know the source of his intense hatred. He fiercely declares his unwavering commitment to remain by the Countess's side. Shocking truth drops when Everett reveals he has no family left to return to. He tearfully confesses the dark reality of the physical abuse he suffered in his past. The blonde Noah freezes in absolute horror as the brutal truth sinks in. Overwhelmed by visions of his companion's painful past, Noah is crushed by intense regret. He realizes that his rival's defensiveness was merely a desperate shield against overwhelming vulnerability. In a beautiful moment of maturity, Noah stops his departing friend to offer a tearful apology. Shedding his stubborn pride, the blonde boy takes full responsibility for his past cruelty. Everett stands completely stunned, unable to comprehend this sudden, emotional plea. The heavy tension finally breaks as tears of mutual understanding pool in their eyes. With a shattered ego and an open heart, Noah begs for a fresh start. Back in the present, the Duke looks on with immense pride at the fruit of his labor. Deeply relieved, the Countess expresses her infinite gratitude for his transformative mentoring. The handsome Duke offers his permanent support, ensuring she never has to face these burdens alone. The atmosphere shifts instantly when he unexpectedly asks about her estranged brother. He reveals his older sibling's prestigious title, sparking her deep curiosity. The Countess tries to connect the pieces, wondering if his family was behind a famous local victory. She presses for more details, but the Duke suddenly hesitates to discuss his family dynamics. An awkward silence falls over the charismatic nobleman as he reflects on his brother. She playfully teases him about being a protective sibling, which he bashfully attempts to deny. Their intimate conversation is interrupted as the boys eagerly call out to her. The two young wards proudly present a beautiful flower crown they crafted together. Her face lights up with pure joy as she accepts their heartwarming peace offering. Crowning herself with their gift, she embraces her newly united family in a moment of pure bliss. However, a dark shadow looms elsewhere as a desperate man tightly grips the bars of his cage. Blinded by raw envy, the disgraced former noble screams the Countess's name in fury. His venomous shouts echo through the gloomy prison walls, fueled by unchecked hatred. He is consumed by bitter thoughts of his ex-wife finding happiness and moving on so quickly. He violently slams his fist down, refusing to accept his crushing defeat. As night falls, the Countess walks toward her grand estate gates, unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. The scene shifts to a quiet town under a starry sky where a new level of danger awaits. Lurking in the dimly lit streets, the bitter, silver-haired ex-count curses the rumors of his ex-wife's new suitor. He returns to his rundown quarters where his loyal blonde maid, Ariel, waits his arrival. The toxic nobleman only responds with a venomous glare, directing his frustration at her. He coldly interrogates her, demanding to know if she has remained inside all day. With a harsh command, he orders her to fetch him a drink immediately.
Fuming at his lost luxury, he rages over how his once submissive wife now dares to seek another man's arms. Grips his cup with trembling, furious hands, plotting his next desperate move.
In a pathetic display of cowardice, he blames his entire ruin on the innocent Ariel, leaving her utterly devastated in the dark. Tension thickens in the dimly lit room as Steen's name is called from behind. Ariel tries to comfort him, but her touch only fuels his silent rage. With brutal coldness, he violently shoves her comforting hand away. The sheer force of his rejection sends her tumbling backward in utter shock. He violently grabs her hair, silencing her pleas with ruthless authority. She grits her teeth, forced to endure his toxic cruelty in silence. Meanwhile, Countess Ophelia contemplates a mysterious letter that has arrived at her estate. She reveals she has been invited to a garden party by Marquis Horan. Though worried about meeting strangers, her maid reassures her of the host's gentle reputation. She realizes the prestigious gathering is hosted by the Marquis's own sister. Her thoughts instantly drift to whether Duke Ostion will also be attending. Arriving at the venue, she presents the elegant green invitation to gain entry. The welcoming staff politely ushers her into the beautiful, sunlit garden party. She observes the small, exclusive crowd, confirming the intimate nature of the gathering. Plagued by sudden self-doubt, she is startled when a voice calls her name. She turns to find Duke Ostion, who warmly wishes they had arrived together. He is surprised to learn his sister Grace personally invited her here. Suddenly, the silver-haired host sneaks up behind them with a playful smile. Grace and her elegant companion warmly welcome the Countess to the party. Sensing an opportunity, Grace pulls the Countess aside for a private chat. Ophelia curtsies politely, but Grace insists they drop formalities and speak warmly. Grace asks if she is Ostion's partner, throwing Ophelia into a panic. Ophelia anxiously asks if she made a mistake, but Grace reassures her. Grace curiously asks what qualities drew the Countess to her notoriously cold brother. She describes the Duke's terrible dating habits, leaving Ophelia frozen in shock. Blushing red, Ophelia fiercely denies any romance, insisting it is strictly platonic. Ophelia explains her ongoing divorce, but Grace playfully demands her full attention. Grace expresses sincere gratitude for the positive, stabilizing influence Ophelia has on Ostion. She explains how the Duke's notoriously blunt personality usually keeps women away. Despite his rough exterior, Grace reveals the Duke genuinely tries to be kind. Intrigued, the Countess asks what caused him to become so guarded. Grace explains their family history, revealing how their distant father drove her obsession. She reveals his childhood trauma makes him fear repeating his mother's tragic loneliness. Heavy mood shifts instantly as Grace begins trembling over a rumor. She hilariously celebrates her brother's dating life, completely ignoring Ophelia's desperate denials. The lighthearted banter is shattered by a loud, aggressive commotion at the entrance. Crowd gasps as the intruder demands to see Countess Heavenwork. Refusing to hide, a determined Ophelia demands to be guided to the gates. Heavy sense of dread fills the air with every step she takes. Guests turn in absolute shock as the furious shouts draw closer. She freezes as a venomous, all-too-familiar voice echoes through the elegant garden. Her disgraced, disheveled ex-husband Steen violently breaks through, raving like a madman. Pale with fear, she whispers his name as her worst nightmare returns. Blinded by pure venom, Steen screams for her to face him immediately. Her legs buckle under the sheer weight of her mounting panic. Before she can fall, a strong, protective hand catches her shoulder. Duke Ostion pulls her close, shielding her from the chaotic scene. The elite crowd whispers in shock scandal at the explosive drama. Security guards block his path, refusing entry without a formal invitation. They grab him forcefully, dragging him away as his desperate plan completely implodes. A mysterious figure dressed in a dark gray cloak violently grabs the carriage reins with a loud, aggressive shout. Inside the carriage, the gray-haired Everett and blonde Noah brace themselves as the vehicle begins violently shaking. The sinister, silver-haired ex-Count Steen grins maliciously as he holds his young, unsuspecting victims hostage. As the carriage speeds away, the dark history of Steen's obsessive jealousy flashes before his eyes. In a painful memory, the red-haired Countess Ophelia coldly demands that he leave and never return. Steen recalls the agonizing sight of his ex-wife finding comfort in the arms of the handsome Duke Ostion. He watches them share an intimate smile, fueled by a toxic envy that completely consumes his sanity. Disgraced and defeated, Steen is ruthlessly dragged away by security guards while screaming in denial. From the absolute bottom of his ruin, Steen reaches out, desperately seeking vengeance against the happy couple. The ex-count's face distorts with absolute madness as he screams his ex-wife's name in pure fury. With a sudden violent crash, the painful illusions of his lost luxury are shattered to pieces. Waking up in a cold sweat, the silver-haired Steen gasps for breath as his nightmare fades into reality. Huddled against a cold stone wall, he mutters to himself while plotting a dangerous new scheme. Sneaking out under the cover of night, Steen anxiously looks around to make sure the coast is clear. He stops dead in his tracks as a massive prestigious estate comes into view. Bitter resentment boils within him as he mutters curses toward Ophelia's newfound happiness. Suddenly, voices echo in the dark, forcing Steen to quickly hide behind a wooden pillar. Peeking through the dense foliage, he stealthily observes the mansion staff to find his opening. He overhears the carriage driver announcing his departure to pick up the young masters. A sinister smile plays on Steen's lips as he realizes the boys are completely vulnerable. Creeping silently along the stone path, he prepares to execute his desperate ambush. The driver bids farewell to his colleague, completely unaware of the threat lurking in the shadows. Before anyone can react, the hijacked carriage speeds away into the dark forest. Gripping the reins with mad triumph, Steen boasts of his successful theft. Squeezing the ropes tightly, he blames Ophelia for forcing his hand into this extreme measure. He justifies his dangerous kidnapping as a desperate act of self-defense against his enemies. Meanwhile, the two young boys find themselves stranded and confused in the middle of a dense forest. With heavy bags and tired legs, their grueling trek through the wilderness begins. In a flashback, Steen pulls back his hood with a chilling grin, leaving the children behind. The blonde Noah looks up suspiciously, questioning if this mysterious driver was truly sent by the Countess. Sensing immediate danger, the brave boy demands that the driver identify himself. Silent imposter holds the reins, keeping his hood pulled low to avoid their glare. Without another word, the carriage speeds off into the distance, abandoning the boys in the dark. Left with no other choice, the two young wards agree to search for a way out together. As the hours drag on under the full moon, physical exhaustion finally takes its toll. Unable to take another step, the exhausted Noah screams out in pure frustration. Lost and disoriented, the boys begin to bicker about their direction. Everett collapses onto the dirt path, completely depleted of energy after hours of walking. Noah tries to lighten the heavy mood by teasing his companion about eating more to grow. Everett fires back with a classic insult, proving their brotherly banter is still alive. But the playful teasing quickly fades as the dark reality of their situation sets back in. Determined to survive, they resolve to keep moving forward despite the darkness. In a heartwarming show of solidarity, Everett lends a helping hand to lift his weary companion. Teasing each other about who would cry first, their bond grows stronger in the face of adversity. Suddenly, a misstep on the rough terrain sends one of them stumbling forward. With a startled cry, the boys lose their footing and tumble down into a dark ravine. Back at the mansion, Countess Ophelia is struck by absolute horror upon learning her boys have vanished. Her hands tremble with maternal panic as she rushes to find answers. The terrified carriage driver and butler offer desperate apologies under her furious interrogation. Clutching her chest in agony, the desperate countess demands a search party be launched immediately. A mother's worst nightmare explodes into reality as Countess Ophelia battles a wave of sheer terror, finding strength only in the memory of Duke Ostian's warm reassurance. Refusing to break under pressure, the fierce countess commands her servants to summon the Duke to aid in the rescue. The loyal household staff immediately acknowledge her desperate command with absolute obedience. The frantic butler pledges to escort her directly back to the manor to launch an all-out search. A burning, protective resolve ignites within Ophelia as she prepares to face the oncoming storm head-on. The grand estate stands silent under the cold night sky as the frantic investigation begins.
Heavy footsteps suddenly echo through the silent corridors as a servant rushes in with urgent moves.
Duke Ostian watches in deep concern as the panicked countess frantically searches the room for clues. Trembling with mounting dread, Ophelia mutters in fear as a horrific realization begins to take shape. Her hands shake violently as she clutches a logbook containing a vital clue to her children's whereabouts. The Duke gasps in utter shock at the sudden alarming revelation unfolding right before his eyes. A heavy, suffocating silence descends upon the room as the high-stakes investigation reaches a critical turning point. Suddenly, a sharp noise from the window shatters the tense atmosphere of the dark room. Bursting through the window, the desperate countess screams a frantic demand for the carriage rental records. The startled clerk fumbles in sheer confusion as Ophelia demands absolute urgency from him. The terrified worker quickly hands over the requested logbook under her fierce, unyielding gaze. Her heart races in pure agony as she desperately scans the pages for any sign of her children. Countess Ophelia suddenly freezes in absolute horror as a familiar name leaps off the paper. Clutching the logbook to her chest, she stares ahead in wide-eyed shock as the puzzle pieces fall into place. Sensing her sudden terror, Duke Ostian steps forward to urgently ask if she is all right. She weakly calls out to her companion, her body shivering with a sudden surge of overwhelming dread. Her mind desperately spirals as she struggles to accept the terrifying truth written on the page. Overwhelmed by maternal guilt, she blames herself for bringing this dark danger upon her beloved boys. The Duke stares at her, utterly heartbroken by her agonizing display of self-reproach. He gently takes the logbook from her trembling hands to examine the damning evidence himself.
Ophelia reveals that the suspect who rented the carriage is none other than her ex-husband's business manager.
Duke lowers his eyes in sincere apology, blaming himself for letting his guard down.
The servant suddenly recalls the highly suspicious, reckless driving behavior of the carriage thief from yesterday. Duke Osteon immediately prepares to hunt for eyewitnesses while Ophelia realizes how deeply he cares for her safety.
With unwavering resolve, the Duke promises to contact her the very instant he locates her children. She bids him farewell, placing her complete trust in his ability to bring them home safely. As the cold night deepens, she whispers a silent prayer for a successful rescue.
Hours drag by in agonizing suspense as the desperate mother paces the empty halls alone. She agonizes over why her innocent children had to pay the price for her ex-husband's madness.
She wonders if her public rejection of Steen was the spark that ignited his dangerous wrath. In a painful memory, the mad ex-husband screams in fury, asserting his twisted, toxic dominance over her. Knowing his fragile, wounded pride, she realizes Steen was bound to strike back in the most cruel way. Suddenly, a loud, urgent shout echoes through the silent room, shattering her dark thoughts.
Ophelia gasps in breathless shock as the messenger bursts in with crucial news.
To her overwhelming joy, the two young boys stand before her, completely safe and sound. The Duke solemnly explains how close they came to a total disaster in the dangerous wilderness.
He gently suggests that the exhausted children be taken to their rooms to rest immediately.
Agreeing completely, Ophelia bids her beloved boys goodnight as the maid gently leads them away. She apologizes for her delayed gratitude, but the Duke redirects her focus to what the children witnessed. He reveals the chilling description of the kidnapper, a tall, slender man with silver hair. Countess Ophelia trembles in absolute fury as her ex-husband's wicked deed is officially confirmed. She fiercely declares her intent to confront Steen directly, despite the Duke's doubts of a confession. Armed with undeniable evidence, she vows that the silver-haired villain will have nowhere left to hide. But the Duke firmly intervenes, refusing to let her walk straight into the lion's den alone. She looks back in surprise, realizing she will never have to face her demons alone again. Armed with undeniable proof, the fierce, reddish-haired countess resolves to confront her mad ex-husband directly, regardless of the danger. A carriage speeds down a dusty path toward a remote cabin, carrying the wrath of an enraged mother.
With a sudden jarring halt, the carriage arrives at the quiet hideout.
Ophelia pounds violently against the wooden door, loudly demanding that her ex-husband Steen face her. Losing all patience, the countess fiercely kicks the door, ordering it to be opened immediately. Under the sheer force of her fury, the wooden door finally creaks open. A startled blonde woman opens the door, asking in sheer confusion what is happening. The young blonde woman stands frozen, completely taken aback by the sudden intrusion. The red-haired countess ignores the host's shock, demanding to know what business Steen has hiding here. The bewildered blonde woman glances back into the house, questioning the identity of the intruder. Emerging from the shadows, the silver-haired Steen mockingly asks why the prestigious countess is seeking him out. The blonde woman calls out his name in concern as Steen casually places his hand on her shoulder. Ophelia screams in disgust, calling him shameless and demanding to know why he targeted innocent children. She thrusts a document forward, fiercely accusing him by declaring the handwriting is undeniably his. Ophelia warns him that he will never escape the severe consequences of his kidnapping. Steen smugly scoffs, claiming the children are perfectly fine and asking if he cannot even play a harmless joke. Ophelia's eyes widen in absolute disbelief at his complete lack of remorse. Steen mocks her outrage, insolently suggesting her anger is just a desperate attempt to flirt with him post-divorce. He continues his toxic insults, bluntly telling her that she looks completely crazy. Trembling with pure hatred, Ophelia glares at him, preparing to unleash her final warning.
Suddenly, Steen's arrogant facade crumbles as he violently objects to her words.
Steen screams in fury to silence her, but Ophelia fiercely responds that she is far from finished. Instead of backing down, the countess covers her mouth and chuckles mockingly at his pathetic desperation. Turning away from her ex-husband, she gently tells the dark-haired Duke to wait in the warm carriage. Ophelia announces her departure, leaving Steen to rot in his own miserable failure. Though victorious in the confrontation, the painful encounter still leaves a heavy weight in her chest. As evening falls, a gentle voice softly acknowledges the immense burden she has had to carry. Sitting in the quiet carriage, the exhausted countess reflects on the terrifying ordeal her boy survived. A sudden realization strikes her as she ponders the loyal support she has received. Breaking the silence, she looks at the dark-haired Duke and sincerely thanks him for his help. Duke graciously responds, but admits there is one heartfelt wish he hopes she will grant. He gently points out that whenever a crisis arises, she always turns to him first. Blushing deeply, the countess turns away, admitting she has never felt so thoroughly embarrassed. With warm sincerity, the Duke confesses his happiness at being her protector and asks to continue being her strength. Flustered by his intimate confession, Ophelia stammers in embarrassment while the Duke gently calls her name. A warm, gentle smile graces his handsome face, melting away her lingering worries. The carriage wheel halts with a soft squeak, signaling their safe arrival back home. Stepping down from the carriage, she bids him farewell and repeats her deepest gratitude. The dark-haired man bids her goodbye, leaving her heart fluttering with a sudden spark of romance. The blushing countess frantically tries to cool her red cheeks while her giggling maids watch in delight.
A loyal maid warmly welcomes her back to the safety of the grand estate.
Sharp professional legal advisor adjusting his glasses arrives at the manor to assist her. Ophelia thanks the advisor for arriving so quickly and invites him in to discuss the urgent legal battle. After reviewing the files, the advisor nods in understanding as he analyzes the damning evidence. The advisor confidently explains that this proof gives them a massive advantage to crush Steen in the second trial. Sitting over tea, the legal counselor asks the Countess exactly how severely she wishes to punish her ex-husband. Ophelia's eyes burn with cold resolve as she prepares to state her terms of absolute retribution. She fiercely declares that anyone who dares to touch her beloved family must pay the ultimate price.
Dark, triumphant smirk spreads across the advisor's face as the countdown to Stein's absolute ruin begins.